to cook Italian in Bermuda or Turkey. Was that a challenge?
It was, yeah, but I like challenges, so that's one of the reasons why I started to travel, because of my job. For example, in Malaysia, I've been sent there to twist a grill restaurant into an Italian restaurant inside a five-star hotel. And I was doing the chef training for the local chefs. And then I build the menus, I train the chefs, and then I eventually go back.
In Italian food, is there lots of innovation?
I would say in the past 10 years, yes. It used to be a very traditional cuisine, but in the past 10, 15 years, Italian chefs, they are a bit more open-minded, I would say.
Give us some examples of your innovation.
Well, hide and seek is very well around the innovation. In that bar is a bar and kitchen where we have a cherry plate concept, where we try to take our guests in a culinary journey, starting from a classic dish and then reinventing into a modern twist. Usually I like to twist the style of cuisine between different countries, different continents.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Merry Christmas, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on the 27th of December. It's a Friday, by the way, if you're keeping count. My name's Tom Harwood. Now, war on the right. Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage trade Christmas blows, with the Tory leader accusing Reform of a fake party membership counter, while Farage says the Conservative brand is dying under Badenoch's leadership. Whatever happened to the season of goodwill? Not behind bars. Thousands of prisoners could be allowed to come and go from so-called open prisons during the daytime in new plans to ease overcrowding. The government's sentencing review lead has said his open prison plan could cut reoffending and save us all cash. The dramatic Azerbaijan airline crash on Christmas Day had its navigation jammed by Russia after being struck by a missile, according to fresh reports. 38 passengers were killed as the plane's emergency landing erupted in a fireball. Are any planes flying east safe? And a snap election after the German government collapsed earlier this month. Today, a fresh election date is set for the 23rd of February. With the Christmas market attack and a shrinking economy, all eyes are on the radical right-wing AfD party. Well, a very happy Christmas to you. I had to check and just remind myself of the day of the week at the start there, because I think during this time of the year, you really do get the sense of a loss of time, a loss of day, and that's what it's all about, really. We sort of fall into this sort of lethargy, this warm lethargy that I think this season is all about. But do get in touch with how you've spent your Christmas. gbnews.com/yoursay is the way to get involved. Of course, your views and thoughts are very welcome across all of the topics we're discussing today too. Are you interested in the German election or the brewing row between Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage here at home? Or perhaps the recent fly past of the sun by a NASA probe has piqued your interest? Well, we'll be discussing that a little bit later in the programme. It's a very varied show this well, it's the third day of Christmas, I suppose. We don't really have a proper name. We've got Christmas Day, Boxing Day, and this is just the other one, isn't it? I suppose we're just in the run-up to New Year now. But your company is very, very welcome here. Thank you for watching us here on GB News, and I'll see you very shortly after your latest news headlines with Mark White.
Good afternoon, it's 2 minutes past 12. The main headlines from the GB News Centre. The Metropolitan Police have charged a man with 4 counts of attempted murder. It comes after 4 pedestrians were hit by a car in the West End of London on Christmas Day. Anthony Gilheany has also been charged with causing serious injury by driving while disqualified and for the possession of a bladed weapon in a public place. One victim is still in hospital in a critical condition. The UK's national rail network is facing severe disruption as major engineering works, including for HS2, are prioritised over the coming days. To add to the misery, Avanti workers are preparing to stage a 5-month-long series of strikes after pay negotiations broke down. Travellers are being advised to check before they travel. Well, travel expert Simon Calder spoke to GB News earlier and said the work was necessary.
The railways to start turning themselves around and stop taking £400 per second in taxpayer subsidy. They've got to attract new people in. And if you're one of these occasional travellers, and every time you look at it, it's Christmas or Easter or whatever, and there aren't any trains to your local station, just looking up here, I can see that Crewe is off limits today, as is Liverpool and Chester. You're going to think, well, I'm not going to bother. I'm going to get in the car, or indeed get one of the excellent long-distance bus services. But they say the work has to be done. It will improve the system, make it more resilient, and hopefully things will get rather better.
Sources have told Reuters news agency that Russian air defences were responsible for downing an Azerbaijan Airlines plane that crashed in Kazakhstan and killed 38 people. The plane was diverting from an area of southern Russia where Moscow has repeatedly used air defence systems against Ukrainian drone strikes when it crashed. And within the past few minutes, Azerbaijan Airlines have said the plane was interfered with by external factors. Well, the former Pentagon senior advisor on international security, Anne Daly, says Russia must accept responsibility.
If Russia tries to deny this or cover this up, it could lead to a rift in Russian relations with Azerbaijan. If Russia doesn't apologize for what it's done and provide greater clarity in its airspace management, that could also lead to further degradation of relations between Russia and other countries.
Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has hit back at Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch over claims he exaggerated Reform's membership numbers. On Boxing Day, Reform claimed to have surpassed the total number of Conservative Party members based on a digital tracker on its online membership page. But Kemi Badenoch has slammed the announcement as fake, using misleading figures. Nigel Farage had this to say when he spoke to GB News a little earlier.
You know, I don't mind all sorts of comments being made about me, but to be accused by her of being a fraudster, I'm sorry, I am not going to let this rest. We are going to become the challengers of Labour. We are becoming the real opposition. They can say what they like. The Conservative brand is broken. So many broken promises, time and time again. People have had enough. They're looking for something fresh, new and honest.
Well, in response, a Conservative Party spokesperson has told GB News that Reform has delivered a Labour government and that only the Conservatives can stop this. The German president has dissolved Parliament to pave the way for a snap election on the 23rd of February. It comes after German Chancellor Olaf Scholz lost a confidence vote earlier this month after weeks of infighting with his coalition partners over the coalition's budget and economic policy. South Korea's parliament has voted to impeach acting President Han Duck-soo. The move was triggered by a short-lived period of martial law declared by Mr. Han's predecessor, Yoon Suk-yeol. Mr. Han says he will step aside to avoid more chaos. And finally, homeless shelters and food banks will receive surplus food from farmers as part of a £15 million initiative set to be launched by the government next year. The government currently estimates that around 330,000 tonnes of edible food a year is wasted. And that's it. You're right up to date with the latest GB News headlines. We're back with more in half an hour.
Merry Christmas, Britain. It is now 8 minutes past midday on this Friday afternoon. Yes, we're in the middle of the Christmas period, and I hope you're having a very happy time of year when those dark nights and late mornings all roll on. But away from the sort of Christmas pudding and stuffing-laden tables, a fresh row has broken out between Reform UK leader Nigel Farage and the Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch. It all follows Reform's claims that it now has more members than the Conservative Party, according to the digital tracker that people watching on television can see on our screens right now. Well, Kemi Badenoch, however, has slammed the announcement as fake. She's accused Reform UK of issuing misleading figures, saying that this clicker, this timer on their website is coded to tick up automatically. Well, as you would expect, Nigel Farage has hit back, accusing her of being bitter, upset and angry. So what's going on? Has the Reform Party overtaken the Tories on membership numbers? And does the number of party members even matter that much? After all, Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party had 500,000 members. And where did that get him? Well, delighted to be joined now by the director of the Popular Conservatives group, Mark Littlewood. And Mark, you've got a very interesting column out in The Telegraph today, building on Kemi Badenoch's metaphor of being a restaurant manager. She says that she doesn't need a menu to be to offer the electorate, to offer her potential customers at this point in time. Do you think she's right there, and is her love of metaphors perhaps holding her back?
Well, I rather liked her metaphor. One of the charming things about Kemi is she sort of thinks aloud on television and radio. I think we want more of that from our politicians. But I thought, as you said, in my Telegraph piece, I wanted Tom to delve a bit deeper into this restaurant analogy. Now, what Kemi's saying, which is true, is that she doesn't need to map out the entire Conservative manifesto 6, 7, 8 weeks into her leadership. There's 4 years until the next general election. But my concern is, even if she hasn't worked out every single ingredient on the menu or exactly how much salt to put in the soup, she does at least need to work out what sort of food she's selling. Is it pasta or curry or burgers or vegetarian? And therefore, there are some big calls you need to make, even if you haven't worked out all of the technical details of the menu. So I think there are some bits which she considers to be menu items, like should we leave the ECHR? Should we abandon carbon net zero? What should the broad rate of tax be? And I don't think those are menu items. I think those are broad brand propositions. So I think while she can take her own sweet time in drawing up actual detailed technical policy plans, she needs to get some pretty clear signposts down, I think, early in the new year around the big issues that, frankly, Nigel Farage has been leading on and has been generating news headlines on and has been seeing his party tick up, not just in membership, but in the national opinion polls too.
Mark, to that extent, do you think it was a mistake that Kemi Badenoch sent this tweet out yesterday, that she's been talking about this row over what most people in the country might think is a relatively technical thing? I mean, the number of members that her party has, rather than talking about policy and what her party would be doing. Instead, she's arguing whether or not a counter on a Reform website was algorithmic or programmatic.
That's right, I think, unless Kemi knows something that I don't. The one key rule of politics is sort of don't get involved in process issues. I doubt very many GB News viewers care about exactly how many members each party's got. It matters because it sort of talks to how many candidates you might be able to field in local elections, how many leaflet deliverers you've got on the ground, how many enthusiasts you've got knocking on doors. It matters to the party, but it doesn't matter to the average GB News viewer. It doesn't matter to the average elector. I mean, it's probably true that if you're to look at the two parties' membership figures, to be a bit of a political nerd here, that you are comparing apples and pears. For example, the Conservative figure of 131,800, I think that's the one that Reform have used, that was the number of ballot papers issued for the Jenrick versus Badenoch leadership contest in October. So it doesn't include anyone who's joined the Conservative Party since April, because you needed to have been a member for a good number of months. months to get that ballot paper. Of course, it doesn't include anyone who's resigned from the Conservative Party since the leadership election. And there's been a couple of high-profile cases there at least. So we're comparing apples and pears, but we are definitely comparing fruit with fruit. These are broadly the same numbers. Whether Reform has just overtaken the Conservatives at the exact second they said, I can't be sure, but their trajectory is on the up. And I would have much preferred the leader of the Conservative Party to concentrate on some bold policy proposals rather than to get into an argument with Nigel Farage and algorithms.
Comparing fruit with fruit. At least it's not comparing fruit cake with fruit cake, as perhaps David Cameron might once have said in an earlier political time. But Mark, you write something in your piece in The Telegraph that perhaps it explains far more than all of these technicalities or even the issue of policy. And that's if we're going to extend this restaurant metaphor about the Conservative Party. The people who used to eat at the Conservative restaurants came to believe that the staff at the restaurants were urinating in the soup.
So I do draw that analogy. As I said, I delve quite deep into this metaphor, Tom. I mean, I'm not sure I quite agree with Nigel Farage that the Conservative brand has been destroyed, but it's definitely been tarnished. Conservatives have got to realise that there are millions of people out there who refused to vote Conservative last time round because they no longer trust the brand. They don't think they're going to get the food that they ordered. They're typically ordering steak and chips and are then being served sort of vegetarian tofu ratatouille, and they've got a bit sick of it. So they're heading off to the shiny Farage-run McDonald's just across the street, where they know if they order a burger, Nigel Farage is going to give them a burger. So Kemi's inherited all of this. You can't really blame her for the 14-year inheritance, or certainly not very much of it. But she has got, in sort of business or restaurant terms, a big turnaround to do. The kitchen's been rat-infested. People don't trust the food. And the company's nearly bust, or certainly in the red. You know, the finances are not good. So she's got a hell of a lot on her plate to turn this around. But I think she's got to start turning it around by, offering the customers, Conservative customers, what they want, which is actually some red meat conservatism. And if she doesn't do that, then Nigel Farage is going to continue to eat her lunch.
Well, Mark Littlewood, on that note, you can tell it's Christmas with all of the food metaphors, I think, under the sun. Thanks so much for joining us here on Merry Christmas, Britain. Well, let's dive a little deeper into this topic. Delighted to be joined in the studio by the former Labour MP and Minister, Dennis McShane. Dennis, Mark there was saying that almost the Tory party need to go after the natural Conservative voters. Is that all they need to do if they're going to win back power? And is it possible to win back power in 4 years' time?
It's certainly possible because other than under Tony Blair, the great thing about the Labour Party is it does one stint in government, 5 years, maybe an extra 6 years, and then it just hands power back to the Tories. During my lifetime, I don't know what's going to happen in 4.5 years' time under Keir Starmer or perhaps under a new Prime Minister. We don't know. I love Mark's restaurant metaphor, but he must be the only man in England who thinks that wodge of brown sludge that is called a McDonald's hamburger is something any human being would want to eat.
Well, this is good enough for the President-elect of the United States, who famously only eats McDonald's.
No, he doesn't. He eats pizzas, but he just scrapes the topping off a pizza and throws away the bread. He still seems to be the fattest politician on earth. But never mind, we're not talking about Donald Trump. No, Mark's a great guy. He was chief press officer for the Liberal Democrats, then for the pro-European Tories, and I'm not quite sure where he is now, but he's always entertaining and interesting. I just think that the idea that any party has got the right to live forever isn't true. If I look at Europe, there's no Conservative Party worthy of the name left in France. There's none in Italy. The other countries, the Nordic countries, they've all but gone. Poland doesn't have one. So the Tories, I mean, they've had the worst 4 or 5... How many leaders have they had since David Cameron? 4, 5, 6, I've forgotten. They're the worst Tory politicians in the history of the party.
Would you say the Law and Justice Party in Poland wouldn't fit in the Conservative mould? They sit in the European Conservative and Reformist group. That's the group that David Cameron set up in 2009.
And a fat lot of good it did David Cameron, because he then plunged into the Brexit plebiscite. That's done huge damage to the Tory party and the country. We're not getting into that debate now, Tom. No, I don't particularly think, to begin with, they were being very nasty on Jewish problems in Poland. I mean, they've calmed that down. They are a populist, unpleasant party. We'll see whether they win again, because an election will be coming up. So anyway,
to circle back to the United Kingdom, I suppose you're pointing to all of these different populist parties in Europe and seeing, well, Mrs. Le Pen in France is doing relatively well. I suppose you could say Meloni is from a populist party.
Oh, yes.
In Italy, you could put the rise in the polls of the AfD in Germany. And, of course, they have elections now in February. We'll be talking about that a little bit later on the programme. I suppose what you're pointing to is a general trend in Europe of this sort of radical right party displacing the establishment right party.
The established right party, not in the sense of British Conservatives, who've been here since the early
1836.
That was when Peel announced a new name for the party, but really they've been there since the middle of the 18th century. They've been the great party of nation, empire, patriotism, but also constantly adapting to the needs of Britain, particularly working-class Britain, poor Britain. This was Disraeli, this was the two nations. I don't want to give you a lecture on Tory party, for God's sake, you know it better than I do. But you've had nobody writing like that in the last 20 years. You've had no minister speaking up for the forgotten Britain, and they just focus on...
You not argue that Boris Johnson was doing that with his, at least with his words. Perhaps you would disagree with his policy. But talking about the levelling up agenda, you could argue that the coalition that Boris Johnson built in the 2019 election was doing exactly that, talking to the different parts of the country that delivered that majority.
Look, I actually like Boris. I mean, maybe not be a very fashionable thing for somebody on Labour to say. I enjoyed his company. He is brilliant. He's also bonkers. But what he did there was to announce a noble ambition, and they completely forget about it, because Boris was a Prime Minister of the rich, for the rich, by the rich. And that's why he got so arrogant, because he behaved like some Tory squire with his famous parties in Downing Street during lockdown, that the Tory MPs, not Parliament, not public opinion, nobody, got rid of him.
But of course, under his watch, the tax burden rose, the amount that was spent on benefits rose. And you could argue that actually he was doing precisely the opposite of what the rich...
Well, hang on a second. He had to deal with COVID. After 1940, when Churchill became Prime Minister, check what happened to taxes then. I mean, the country faced a huge national emergency, as did every other country, and public spending rose dramatically. How we've come out of that is something different, or these are techie arguments. I actually think that there is a fair chance that reform will start knocking on the door. The huge difference with the rest of continental Europe is, I mean, what Nigel ought to be in favour of, in my view, is being back in the EU and fighting for proportional representation like every European country has. Then he stands a chance of being PM. But if we stick to first past the post...
Mr. McShane, are you saying that what Nigel needs to do is become a pro-European and then he'll win?
Well, if he was a European... If he had a European or continental electoral system, and if he was like Marine Le Pen or Giorgia Meloni or Alice Weidel of the AfD and others I can rattle off their names, he would be in business. Now, Giorgia Meloni is Prime Minister of Italy on the basis of 28% of the vote. That won't cut it in England.
Well, of course, Keir Starmer's Prime Minister on the basis of around 34% of the vote.
Yeah, because we first past the post. You can have an argument about first past the post.
Yeah.
Look, these last four Tory leaders, and I call them the Brexit quartet, May, who came after her, Johnson, and then, the lovely Liz Truss.
So you call them the Brexit quartet. Only two of them voted leave.
Well, and then they all adapted to it. They didn't resist it.
I think there would be quite a few Brexiteers who say one of the problems with Theresa May, at least her premiership, was that she didn't really adapt.
Well, all right, but since then we've gone full Monty Brexit with the Johnson deal, my old friend David Frost deal. It has reduced British GDP, reduced exports, reduced trade.
British GDP is higher now than it was before the referendum.
Well, for heaven's sake, every country's GDP is a bit higher.
Well, maybe not Germany's, but
no, it is. German GDP is high. This is just per capita.
Germany's been in recession the last 2 years.
No, German GDP per capita. I mean, we would die to have it, and they had to absorb East Germany. I mean, if we'd done that, it'd be like taking in, I don't know, Bangladesh, and bringing everybody in Bangladesh up to British levels of living. But to go back, my main point is first past the post. First past the post is the problem. Kemi should stick to that.
It's interesting your argument there that the first past the post is the problem. That's a very Reform Party argument there. Perhaps there is common cause with yourself and Nigel Farage after all. But Dennis McShane, thank you so much for being here. Fascinating conversation as always. Now, I must say there is much more coming up on today's show. Thousands of prisoners could be allowed to come and go from so-called open prisons. That's during the daytime, and new plans to ease overcrowding in our prisons. Well, is this a good idea, or is it putting the public at risk? That's next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, joining us now is Feng Shui expert Karina Sophia, who's going to share some of the best ways to ensure that our homes are still feeling calm as well as beautifully decorated this Christmas time.
One of the Feng Shui myths is that Feng Shui is all about moving furniture, and it isn't at all. Oh. Well, there is a little bit of that. It is about the flow of energy, but it starts outside, so there's lots of different forms of Feng Shui. So what we're going to talk about today is one form called Flying Stars Feng Shui, and there's another one that's classical, and form Feng Shui starts outside. If a 5-year-old would walk past your house and be happy, then the energy will.
I love that.
So if a 5-year-old would like to see more, would like to come in and would touch anything and not get hurt, then it's a good thing and the energy is feeling good and wants to come in as well.
What about the light colours? Does that matter? Does that come into play?
Yes, there are different colours. Depending on the direction, the compass direction of your home, there are good colours that support energy inside the home. So if your home is facing north, for instance, then it would be sitting south, and the inherent energy of the south is fire. So you want to have red or green, which is wood that fuels the fire, and that supports the inside of the home. Now, I just painted my door red a couple of days ago, and then I got this opportunity, so don't underestimate it. You want to decorate your tree with whatever you want to manifest. Whatever it is that you want to bring into your life. So this speaks for itself. It says joy. Oh. And it has a bell
I
on
like
it.
that idea. I can get on board with this. So you decorate your tree with things you'd like to see in your life.
Yes.
Okay.
So we're going to put some joy.
That would be nice.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Merry Christmas, Britain. It's 27 minutes past midday. Now, ministers have been urged to move thousands of inmates into low-security open prisons, all to tackle the ongoing overcrowding crisis. Well, the suggestion has come from the former Conservative Justice Secretary, David Gauke. He now leads what is called a sentencing review appointed by Sir Keir Starmer. Now, he says the UK should follow Spain's approach, whereby convicted criminals are free to come and go from these open prisons during the daytime, going to work or to study. Well, I'm delighted to be joined now by the former Chief Inspector of our prisons, Nick Hardwick. Nick, thanks so much for joining us. Firstly, what is an open prison? A lot of people would say they don't really sound that much like prison at all.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. An open prison, there are open prisons in existence at the moment. They all differ slightly, but essentially, prisoners will be expected to be in the prison continually when they start their sentence, and thereafter for most of the, certainly at night, but in the day, they would be able to go out to work or education or maybe to see their family.
So it's really not that much like a prison, more like a sort of student hall where you might have a curfew, you go to sleep and you wake up for breakfast, but otherwise you're roaming around the place.
I think there are two groups of prisoners this might be useful for. The first group is people who are coming to the end of a long sentence in closed conditions, where they need to be prepared for and tested for re-entry into the community. And secondly, I think there are some prisoners or offenders where we want to punish them and restrict their liberty. And we can do that in an open prison. You certainly can't live a normal life in an open prison, but we want them to keep their job and we want them to keep their accommodation, and we want them to be looking for and paying for their family rather than the state doing it. So I think there are circumstances in which this is useful. The other thing that is in this set of proposals is there should be a much clearer set of rewards and punishments for people when they're in prison. So if you behave properly in prison, you attend classes, you attend work, then that improves your chances of getting moved to an open prison. If you behave badly, then that reverses it. And I think most people will be very surprised that there isn't a very effective or clear system of reward and punishment for people in prison now.
No, that does sound sensible, although a lot of people would think that having the word prison attached to these open prisons at all doesn't really sound much like prison to what anyone would think a prison is actually about. It sounds more like this is sort of a slightly stricter form of licensing. I mean, it's almost like a sort of super tag attached to these prisoners' legs rather than a prison.
Well, it's more restrictive than that. I think to be clear, what's important about it is a punishment. Right? So that if I sent you to an open prison, the normal things you do in your day-to-day life, you would no longer be able to do those. You'd just have to go to work and there'd be a very restricted range of activities you could go to. And if you broke those rules or broke those conditions, you would go back into a closed prison. So it is a punishment. If you don't need to punish people, well, then don't send them to any kind of institution. Yeah. It's a punishment, but it's less severe than some of the alternatives.
Now,
and
Nick,
for a less offence, that might be sensible.
You used to be the chief inspector of prisons in this country. Just how overcrowded are our prisons? We keep being told about the problems and the problems and the problems, and this is the reason for shorter sentences or for open prisons or all the rest of it. How bad is it?
Right. The overcrowding is a big problem. It's not really a question, or mainly a question of physical space, in my opinion. It's simply we haven't got the staff, the prison officers, to look after the number of prisoners we've got. But I don't think this proposal, I don't think its main purpose or main benefit would be reducing overcrowding. Its main benefit is I think it would reduce reoffending. We know that what reduces reoffending is if somebody has a job, if they've got a home, and if they can maintain a healthy relationship with their family. And of course, that's much easier to do in an open prison than if you're behind closed walls where the IT doesn't work. So I think in terms of keeping the public safe, this would work better. But also, like to be clear, some people in open prisons will abscond and not obey the rules. Right? So that it's not a risk-free solution, but it's less risky than the alternatives, I think.
Well, I suppose unless these people are looked at. It's a risk to the public if these people are walking around, if they're violent criminals, for example. I suppose, surely there should be at least some preclusion around violent criminals going to these.
Of course. If you're a violent, you should be assessed. If you're a violent prisoner or you've committed some sorts of offences, you need to be in closed conditions, both to keep the public safe and also because that's an appropriate punishment for the harm you've done. But for less serious, non-violent offenders or people coming to the end of a long sentence, I think this would keep the public safer than simply releasing them back into the community untested and unprepared.
Interesting stuff. Well, Nick Hardwick, former Chief Inspector of Prisons, thanks so much for joining us here on GB News this afternoon.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, this is Merry Christmas, Britain, and there's plenty more coming up. We'll be discussing just who might be responsible for the Azerbaijan airline crash. The finger being pointed, of course, towards the Russians. Did this plane have its navigation systems scrambled? That's after your news headlines.
Good afternoon. The main headlines from the GB News Centre. And GB News can confirm that hundreds of migrants are currently attempting to cross the English Channel for the third day running. This channel's Kent producer has told us that 2 small boat loads have already been intercepted by Border Force and around 80 migrants brought to Dover Harbour. A further 4 small boats are still out in the middle of the channel attempting to reach UK waters. Well, if all the migrant boats make it to UK waters today, it will take the total who've crossed since Christmas Day to around 1,000. The Metropolitan Police have charged a man with 4 counts of attempted murder. It comes after 4 pedestrians were hit by a car in the West End of London on Christmas Day. Anthony Gilheany has also been charged with causing serious injury by driving whilst disqualified and for the possession of a bladed weapon in a public place. One victim is still in hospital in a critical condition. The UK's national rail network is facing severe disruption as major engineering works, including for HS2, are prioritised over the coming days. To add to the misery, Avanti workers are preparing to stage a 5-month-long series of strikes after pay negotiations broke down. Travellers are being advised to check before they travel.
The railways to start turning themselves around and stop taking £400 per second in taxpayer subsidy. They've got to attract new people in. And if you're one of these occasional travellers, and every time you look at it, it's Christmas or Easter or whatever, and there aren't any trains to your local station, just looking up here, I can see that Crewe is off limits today, as is Liverpool and Chester. You're going to think, well, I'm not going to bother. I'm going to get in the car, or indeed get one of the excellent long-distance bus services. But they say the work has to be done. It will improve the system, make it more resilient, and hopefully things will get rather better.
Well, sources have told Reuters news agency that Russian air defences were responsible for downing an Azerbaijan Airlines plane that crashed in Kazakhstan and killed 38 people. The plane was diverting from an area of southern Russia where Moscow has repeatedly used air defence systems against Ukrainian drone strikes when it crashed. And within the past hour, Azerbaijan Airlines have said the plane crash was caused by external interference. Homeless shelters and food banks will receive surplus food from farmers as part of a £15 million initiative set to be launched by the government next year. Well, the government currently estimates that around 330,000 tonnes of edible food a year is wasted. And that's it. You're right up to date with all the latest headlines. After the news, it's the housewife's favourite. Well, you can see who it will be after the break.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's a cloudy and murky end to the week with fog and some patchy drizzle in places, and it is going to be feeling rather cold under those cloudier skies too, where we see more persistent outbreaks of rain and drizzles just where we find this trailing frontal system just to the far northwest of the country. High pressure dominating elsewhere, but there's lots of cloud and moisture trapped underneath that high, so quite a cloudy and murky day ahead, likely to see some quite foggy conditions lingering on through much of the day too, with some drizzle, particularly around hilly areas. And that more persistent rain and drizzle stays to the far northwest of Scotland at times, where it's likely to be quite grey. And as I say, those temperatures really struggling under cloudier skies, but slightly milder across parts of Scotland, highs of 9 to 10 Celsius. Now, as we head into the evening, once again, that cloud and those outbreaks of drizzle likely to linger on in the far northwest of Scotland, largely cloudy elsewhere, perhaps some clearer spells around Aberdeenshire. And once again, across Northern Ireland, parts of Northern England, fairly cloudy, still foggy at times with those outbreaks of drizzle. And it's fairly similar across much of England and Wales too. And that leads us into a largely cloudy night. Once again, fairly similar conditions with some fog, some low cloud, and also some drizzle in places. And once again, those outbreaks of rain still lingering on across parts of northwest Scotland, perhaps just edging in to western parts of Northern Ireland later on into the day. So once again, remaining fairly cloudy, drizzly at times, and in some places, temperatures not really changing compared to what they were during the day. Now, to start off on the weekend, there's not much change. Once again, plenty of cloud across the country. This area of rain slowly sinking its way southwards, turning clearer to the north of this, though plenty of blustery showers following on behind. And once again, those temperatures really struggling under cloudier skies, highs of around 8 Celsius in the south, but we could see 10 Celsius across parts of Scotland.
The latest GB News travel.
Westbound on the M8, the exit slip road is closed to flooding at junction 25A. Traffic is coping well. Southbound on the M42, though, it is very slow. There is a lane closure to a broken down vehicle from 10 for Tamworth to Coles Hill at junction 9. Northbound on the M23, a lane closure and slow traffic to a broken down vehicle from Gatwick Airport at 9 through to junction 8. All cleared, though, for the westbound side of the M2 following an earlier accident between 6 to the Stockbury roundabout at 5. Northbound on the M11, the exit slip road has also cleared following recovery work to a broken down vehicle at junction 14, and clear for the northbound side of the M1 to an earlier broken down vehicle between Bedford at 13 to Milton Keynes at 14. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Merry Christmas, Britain. It's now 20 to 1, and speculation continues to grow that anti-aircraft defence systems from Russia were responsible for the Azerbaijan Airlines crash, which happened, of course, on the early hours of Christmas Day. Well, flight J28243, catchy name, it crashed in a ball of fire near the city of Aktau in Kazakhstan after diverting from an area of southern Russia where Moscow has repeatedly used defence systems against Ukrainian drones. Well, NATO is seeking a probe into this incident as soon as possible, while the Kremlin has cautioned against drawing any premature conclusions. A spokesman for them says we need to wait for the investigation to conclude. But there's already reports breaking. There's suggestions that the navigation systems of this plane were tampered with, perhaps from Russia. But what could really be behind this crash that left dozens dead? We can speak now with the Senior Consulting Fellow of Russia and Eurasia programme at Chatham House, Keir Giles. Keir, thanks so much for joining us here on GB News this Christmas week. First of all, is it possible that this was anything other than a Russian missile that downed this passenger plane?
That seems very unlikely. Now, there have been reports coming out that after the two failed attempts to land at Grozny airport, this aircraft suffered a bird strike, actually hitting birds on the approach to the airport. That's a fairly reasonable conclusion for somebody to leap to if you're sitting in the cockpit and something smashes into it, because after all, you're not expecting to be coming under air defense fire. But then there's a pattern of events after that which seem to support this idea that it was, in fact, air defenses that damaged the aircraft critically, so it was unable to land. You've got the pattern of external damage on the aircraft after it crashed in Aktau. You've got the fact that it was difficult to control, apparently. The flight tracking data shows it oscillating wildly in height and having difficulty staying on course. But then, of course, we've also got the inconvenient fact for Moscow that the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder will be recoverable and outside Russia. So any hopes that Russia might have had of concealing the true cause of the incident are probably not going to last very long.
Of course, this isn't the first plane that has been shot down over or around Russia. The famous airline MH17, carrying many passengers, some of them British, many of them Dutch, was shot down over eastern Ukraine around a decade ago now. I suppose the question becomes, is any plane safe, even going near Russia at this stage?
Of course, very different circumstances with MH17, but the same tragic result. Now, then there was an assumption that if civil airliners were in recognized flight paths at a sufficiently high altitude, they wouldn't come into danger from the ongoing fighting below. And that, of course, has been the assumption that has led flights to continue into Russia during a time when they are under attack when Russia is under attack from Ukrainian drones and is loosing off air defense missiles as a result. I think we've already seen a number of airlines reconsidering that now. El Al, for example, Kazakhstan Airlines, we say, are suspending all flights into Russia, which is a perfectly reasonable reaction because it is simply too dangerous.
This is going to be very, very concerning for many people who might be flying over the next few weeks, few months. Of course, the new year is a popular time for people to fly. Many people might be thinking about flying eastwards. Should they think again?
There are a number of airlines that have already rerouted around Russia altogether to avoid not only Russian sanctions regimes and, of course, the fact that they should not be supporting Russia by paying air transit fees. I'm sure that airlines, will now be reconsidering on the basis of security and safety as well how close their routes can actually go to Russia.
Really, really concerning stuff. Well, Keir Giles, thank you so much for joining us and talking through a shocking Christmas Day story. Thank you so much for joining us this Christmas week here on Merry Christmas Britain. Well, if you're in search of some winter sun, hopefully not too close to Russia, here's the forecast for some of those safer top European holiday destinations.
Be nice to escape the grey.
Clear skies, here we come.
As clear as our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
If you're hoping to escape the grey skies of the UK and seek some sunshine across Europe, then western parts are your best bets over the next few days. With high pressure in charge here, areas of Iberia, southern France and into Italy are going to see a good amount of brightness at the moment. In the east, though, we've got Storm Elena affecting parts of Greece, Cyprus and Turkey. This is bringing strong winds and heavy rain, and this will be continuing over the next few days to come as well.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Well, coming up, newly revealed secrets have shown that the former Prime Minister Tony Blair tried to influence a statement on IRA disarmament made by Gerry Adams. We're going to cross to Northern Ireland with our reporter Doogie Beattie for all of the latest after this.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Dora Carrington is not known to lots of people, and very few pieces are in public collections. So you have had a great deal of work to do to put this exhibition together.
Absolutely. It's been, next year, it will be 30 years since the last major exhibition of Carrington's work, which happened in 1995 at the Barbican Gallery. And I guess if people know Carrington's work, they might have seen the film that took place that year, that came out that year, starring Emma Thompson as Carrington and Jonathan Pryce as Lytton Strachey, who was her main kind of key relationship in her life. And that, in a way, dramatised a lot of those relationships. And so people will often know her life as much as her art. There's only 16 works in public collections, and so apart from chances such as the big billboard campaign you mentioned 10 years ago, there have been very few chances to actually see her work in the flesh. And so what this exhibition does is bring together around 80 works by Carrington and a few of her key contemporaries, providing a new generation really a chance to see and enjoy her work. She was one of the most remarkable of her generation at the Slade School of Art. She won several prizes for her drawing and her draftsmanship. And in the first room of the exhibition, we have some of the work, for example, a couple of female nudes that she painted when she was at the Slade, and they really are kind of quite outstanding.
One of the things that's been said is that in her landscapes, she's sometimes painting the human body as well as the landscape. Is that something that occurred to you? Can you stand up that?
Yes, I mean, one of her most famous paintings we have of Spain has. It's very much like you could liken it to the female form. You know, the kind of the
delicately put.
Yes.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Merry Christmas, Britain. It's coming up to 10 to 1, and it's been a tough year health-wise for the royal family. Our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, has taken a look back at the King's cancer diagnosis.
His Majesty King Charles III has been diagnosed with a form of cancer.
2024, the year of royal health battles. In January, the King went into hospital for treatment on an enlarged prostate, which was benign. His Majesty spent 3 nights at the London clinic before being discharged for a private period of rest. King Charles was widely praised for being so open about his condition. Searches on the NHS websites for enlarged prostate skyrocketed, and it's understood the King was keen to share details of his diagnosis to encourage other men who may be experiencing symptoms to get checked. The following month, Buckingham Palace released an important statement explaining King Charles had been diagnosed with a form of cancer.
My thoughts are with him, and to go through something like cancer but in the public eye is pretty something.
Yeah, it's sad. Hopefully he can make a recovery.
It's a shame for the family more than anything. I think of the family like you would do your own family.
The King stepped back from public duties but continued working through his government red boxes. As winter rolled into spring, a glimmer of hope. Doctors gave him the green light to attend the traditional Easter Sunday service at St George's Chapel in Windsor. Previously advised to avoid large crowds, he greeted members of the public who had gathered.
We're trying to diagnose cancers earlier.
The King chose a Macmillan Cancer Centre in London for his first public engagement following his diagnosis, meeting fellow patients. From then on, the King ramped up his public appearances. Queen Camilla and the King's doctors struggled to persuade him to slow down, as the King was still continuing his weekly cycle of treatment. He persevered with several public engagements, but adaptations were made to keep the King well enough. He travelled in a carriage rather than on horseback during his Trooping the Colour birthday parade in June. By the autumn, the King was allowed to travel thousands of miles for a tour of Australia and attend the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Samoa.
Let us choose within our Commonwealth family the language of community and respect, and reject the language of division.
New Zealand was originally on the cards too, but because of His Majesty's health, doctors advised him to skip the country, a decision taken in close consultation with the Kiwi government. The schedule on tour was gruelling, carrying out more than 30 engagements over 11 days. Despite this, the King appears to be enjoying himself, with the medical team never far away. Next year, royal sources confirm the King plans to carry out a normal-looking overseas tour schedule. This is expected to include both a spring and autumn tour. Cameron Walker, GB News.
Good to see the King back on his feet. Now, newly unsealed documents have revealed that former Prime Minister Tony Blair tried to influence a statement on IRA disarmament made by Gerry Adams. Well, despite the former Sinn Féin leader's confirmation of peace and disarmament, the IRA later accused the government of breaching trust on a leaked letter. Let's discuss this further with our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie. Doogie, what was the Prime Minister trying to do?
It's bizarre, Tom. I mean, we used to be told by Sinn Féin press officers when they came to a press conference they had the keys to Downing Street. It now does appear that they actually had the use of scriptwriters as well. This all circles round the collapse of Stormont in 2002. The IRA's political wing, Sinn Féin, was caught with documents inside this building, and those documents have turned out to be security force names, addresses, etc., for targeting of these people. This was a political wing of the IRA that went in to be peaceful in government, but were still continuing to target. Now, the then Secretary of State, John Reid, had just took over from Peter Mandelson, and it appears that he knew about this 4 months in advance. And strangely enough, Keir Starmer was consulting at that stage for the Northern Ireland Policing Board and Human Rights. So did he know? Those questions would need to be asked. Did he know that this was going on? But Tony Blair, in a panic to get this back up and running and get the confidence of unionists, decided to offer his support to Gerry Adams in the wording of a speech that he would give to an Ardèche in and around IRA decommissioning, putting their weapons out of reach, etc. And that has very much backfired 25 years on, because we would also know that the likes of Alistair Campbell, who was the head of his media at that stage, was probably involved in that. So there's more to come out of this. But we'll be watching, and we now know that what we thought back in 2002 was actually the truth.
Well, Doogie, thank you so much for keeping your eyes on this story. Plenty more, no doubt, to come out around that. The prodigious powers of spin of the new Labour government offered to Gerry Adams. Well, much more to come here on Merry Christmas Britain. Don't go anywhere.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's a cloudy and murky end to the week with fog and some patchy drizzle in places, and it is going to be feeling rather cold under those cloudier skies too. Where we see more persistent outbreaks of rain and drizzles, just where we find this trailing frontal system just to the far northwest of the country. High pressure dominating elsewhere, but there's lots of cloud and moisture trapped underneath that high, so quite a cloudy and murky day ahead. Likely to see some quite foggy conditions lingering on through much of the day too, with some drizzle, particularly around hilly areas. And that more persistent rain and drizzle stays to the far northwest of Scotland at times, where it's likely to be quite grey. And as I say, those temperatures really struggling under cloudier skies, but slightly milder across parts of Scotland, highs of 9 to 10 Celsius. Now, as we head into the evening, once again, that cloud and those outbreaks of drizzle likely to linger on in the far northwest of Scotland, largely cloudy elsewhere, perhaps some clearer spells around Aberdeenshire. And once again, across Northern Ireland, parts of Northern England, fairly cloudy, still foggy at times with those outbreaks of drizzle. And it's fairly similar across much of England and Wales too. And that leads us into a largely cloudy night. Once again, fairly similar conditions with some fog, some low cloud, and also some drizzle in places. And once again, those outbreaks of rain still lingering on across parts of northwest Scotland, perhaps just edging in to western parts of Northern Ireland later on into the day. So once again, remaining fairly cloudy, drizzly at times, and in some places temperatures not really changing compared to what they were during the day.
Now, to start off on the weekend, there's not much change. Once again, plenty of cloud across the country. This area of rain slowly sinking its way southwards, turning clearer to the north of this, though plenty of blustery showers following on behind. And once again, those temperatures really struggling under cloudier skies. Highs of around 8 Celsius in the south, but we could see 10 Celsius across parts of Scotland.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Imagine getting the call to tell you that you've won £50,000 in tax-free cash, our biggest cash prize of the year.
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Oh my God. This is amazing.
I'm in shock.
I'd say don't hesitate, do it.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Donna Ida, who joins us now. And Donna, you look spectacular in your gorgeous denim jumpsuit.
Thank you.
And accessories. And it's important, isn't it, sometimes, just to keep things simple?
I always keep things simple. I travel a lot, I work long hours, and I don't want to think too much about what I'm wearing. So for me, one and done is perfect. Good accessories, fresh hair, nice makeup, and you can go anywhere, including GB News when you didn't know what was happening.
There we
Perfect.
go. Welcome.
Straight off the plane.
Can we ask you some of our top denim questions?
Yes.
Because Stephen Dixon, the presenter of The Breakfast Show who's just on, said that double denim to him is an absolute no-go.
Oh, what does
Is that true?
Don't have him on again, darling.
OK. We're telling me fact.
I love double denim.
Really?
I love it. I think it is so cool.
Does it have to be a different
I was going to say double denim, same colour.
Or same
I like the... For me, I actually do like the same. Think Saint Laurent 70s. There's an amazing one that we're doing that's going to look great on you in the new season. The Joan Jean, we've got the City Slicker shirt. Oh, it's amazing. If it's done well, it's perfect. And I like it in a paler blue, but a good mid to dark. Very chic.
Yeah, you go.
No, well, I was just thinking, little old me, not quite sure
You'd look amazing,
what to wear this morning. How
was a
do
bit
guys
stressed.
pull off denim?
For me, if I was dressing you, I would have put you in a pair of jeans this morning with his amazing jumper. Gorgeous watch.
Black, blue?
Black denim I do like. Men don't like it so much. Men like charcoal denim.
Oh, I don't like grey.
Charcoal. I love grey, and the best seller for men is charcoal denim.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Merry Christmas, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Friday, the 27th of December. I'm Tom Harwood. Now, war on the right. Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage trade Christmas blows, with the Tory leader accusing Reform of a fake party membership counter, while Farage says the Conservative brand is dying under Badenoch's leadership. Now Reform may sue Kemi Badenoch over her remarks. Whatever happened to the season of goodwill? The dramatic Azerbaijan airline crash on Christmas Day had its navigation jammed by Russia after being struck by a missile. That's according to fresh reports. 38 passengers were killed as the plane's emergency landing erupted in a fireball. Are any planes flying east safe this Christmas? Not behind bars. Thousands of prisoners could be allowed to come and go from so-called open prisons during the daytime in new plans to ease overcrowding. The government's sentencing review lead has said this open prison plan could cut reoffending and save money. And snap election. Not in this country, but Germany. Yes, after the German government collapsed earlier this month, today a fresh election date is set for the 23rd of February. With the Christmas market attack and a shrinking economy, all eyes are on the radical right-wing AfD party. It might be Christmas, but the news doesn't stop. No, we've got a jam-packed couple of hours up for you, so do not go anywhere. Digest your leftovers from your Christmas lunch and sit down with Merry Christmas Britain. And of course, send your views and post your comments by visiting gbnews.com/your say. I'm keen to hear how you spent your Christmas and indeed what you think on all the major talking points of today. So we're going to get stuck into the juicy news after your latest headlines with Mark White.
Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 1. The latest headlines from the GB News Centre. And GB News can confirm that more than 1,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel since Christmas Day, as hundreds more are currently attempting to cross for the third day running. It comes as the Home Office has just confirmed that 407 crossed on Boxing Day in 10 small boats. That follows 451 who crossed on Christmas Day. Well, this channel's Kent producer has told us that today already 3 small boat loads have been intercepted by Border Force and around 150 migrants brought to Dover Harbour. A further 2 migrant boats are still out in the middle of the channel attempting to reach UK waters. The latest arrivals take the total number who have arrived this year to more than 36,000. The Metropolitan Police have charged a man with 4 counts of attempted murder. It comes after 4 pedestrians were hit by a car in the West End of London on Christmas Day. Anthony Gilheany has also been charged with causing serious injury while driving while disqualified and for the possession of a bladed weapon in a public place. 1 victim is still in hospital in a critical condition. The UK's national rail network is facing severe disruption as major engineering works, including for HS2, are prioritised over the coming days. To add to the misery, Avanti workers are preparing to stage a 5-month-long series of strikes after pay negotiations broke down. Travellers are being advised to check before they travel. Well, travel expert Simon Calder spoke to GB News earlier and said the work was necessary.
The railways to start turning themselves around and stop taking £400 per second in taxpayer subsidy. They've got to attract new people in. And if you're one of these occasional travellers, and every time you look at it, it's Christmas or Easter or whatever, and there aren't any trains to your local station, just looking up here, I can see that Crewe is off limits today, as is Liverpool and Chester. You're going to think, well, I'm not going to bother. I'm going to get in the car, or indeed get one of the excellent long-distance bus services. But they say the work has to be done. It will improve the system, make it more resilient, and hopefully things will get rather better.
Sources have told Reuters news agency that Russian air defences were responsible for downing an Azerbaijan Airlines plane that crashed in Kazakhstan and killed 38 people. The plane was diverting from an area of southern Russia where Moscow has repeatedly used air defence systems against Ukrainian drone strikes when it crashed. And within the past hour, Azerbaijan Airlines have said the plane crash was caused by external interference. Well, former Pentagon senior advisor on international security, Ann Daly, says Russia must accept responsibility.
If Russia tries to deny this or cover this up, it could lead to a rift in Russian relations with Azerbaijan. If Russia doesn't apologize for what it's done and provide greater clarity in its airspace management, that could also lead to further degradation of relations between Russia and other countries.
Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has hit back at Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch over claims he exaggerated Reform's membership numbers. On Boxing Day, Reform claimed to have surpassed the total number of Conservative Party members based on a digital tracker on its online membership page. But Kemi Badenoch has slammed the announcement as fake and issuing misleading figures. Nigel Farage had this to say when he spoke to GB News a little earlier.
You know, I don't mind all sorts of comments being made about me, but to be accused by her of being a fraudster, I'm sorry, I am not going to let this rest. We are going to become the challengers of Labour. We are becoming the real opposition. They can say what they like. The Conservative brand is broken. So many broken promises, time and time again. People have had enough. They're looking for something fresh, new and honest.
In response, a Conservative Party spokesperson has told GB News that Reform has delivered a Labour government and that only the Conservatives can stop this. A topless member of the Ukrainian feminist protest group Femen has been arrested after trying to snatch the statue of the baby Jesus from the nativity scene in St. Peter's Square in the Vatican. The woman climbed over the barriers protecting the nativity scene, but was immediately blocked by the police and taken away. According to the group, the protest was staged to urge action against Russia and to draw attention to what they said is Russia's abduction of over 700,000 Ukrainian children and the inaction of the Pope and international institutions. And those are the latest GB News headlines. We're back with more in half an hour. In the meantime, it's back to Tom.
Well, Merry Christmas, Britain. It is now 8 minutes past 1, and my name's Tom Harwood. Now, a fresh row has broken out between the Reform Party leader Nigel Farage and the Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch. It follows Reform's claims that it now has more members than the Conservative Party, according to the digital tracker you can see on your screens now if you're watching on the television. However, Kemi Badenoch has slammed the announcement as fake and accused Reform UK of issuing misleading figures, saying the clock on their website is coded to tick up automatically. Well, as you'd expect, Nigel Farage has since hit back, accusing her of being bitter, upset and angry. So what's really going on? Has the Reform Party overtaken the Tories in terms of membership? And does the number of party members even matter? After all, Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party had 500,000 members. And where did that get him? Well, I'm delighted to be joined now in the studio by Harry Phibbs of the Conservative Home website. Harry, thanks so much for joining me. Is the Conservative Party worried about Reform's membership surge?
I think to some extent, although it'll be interesting to see how things turn out. I think it could be that the Labour Party should be worrying more because a lot of Reform UK's support might come in places that have been safe Labour areas, Barnsley, Gateshead, Darlington, parts of South Wales and so on. So I think the Labour Party would be complacent, but at the moment it's presented very much as two rival Conservative parties and that people will be leaving the Conservative Party and there'll be this split. I think the Conservatives should respond by being competitive and having their own recruitment drive and the ticker on their own website, which, I mean, it's actually long overdue for the Conservatives to actually be giving out a message to people that they want them to join. I mean, this is something that's quite straightforward, that Reform UK have really emphasised to people that they want them to join. And I think if the Conservatives did the same, they could have some healthy competition.
Of course, Reform UK say they've overtaken the Conservatives. We don't actually know the number of members that the Conservative Party has because they don't publish any numbers of their membership. The only number we have to go on is the number of ballots that was sent out for the leadership election. Yes,
and Reform UK claiming some of those were lapsed members. I mean, who knows? I think they should, the Conservatives should, almost regardless of this Reform UK's membership surge, the Conservative Party should be doing anyway, taking at this point in the political cycle after a general election to really try and build up grassroots organisation. And in the season of goodwill, I would say joining a political party is a good thing. Your chosen political party. It's good for democracy. It's good for community. The Conservatives cost a bit more. I think it's £39. The Champagne Socialists watching to join the Labour Party is a bit more pricey. That's £68. But no, it's a good thing. And we talk about these figures.
Is it a good thing? Of course, it's good for the coffers of the parties that we're talking about, but actually how much power do members have? So often members of political parties want to select one candidate and the central party says no. And then when members do sort of seize power within a party, well, sometimes that can drag parties to the realm of unelectability. After all, Jeremy Corbyn attracted more than 600, around 700,000 members, I think, to the Labour Party at its peak. And of course, he went to a prodigious crash in the polls, the lowest number of Labour MPs since the 1930s.
Yes, I think that was because people, a minority of people were highly motivated by what Jeremy Corbyn stood for, and ultimately, however many members they had, if a majority of the British people didn't share those values, that he was never going to triumph. But I think where it does make a difference is not just people. Often people will just pay money, and that's a good thing, so people aren't dependent on big donors. But also we talk about these figures of 100,000, 200,000, whatever. At a local level, the sort of the Puddleswick branch in Barnsley or whatever, it actually means the inaugural meeting of Reform UK in someone's crowding into someone's sitting room or into an upstairs room in a pub, and people making friends, discussing, who's going to stand for the council. We've got these lazy councillors. You never hear from them. They're a bit complacent. Well, why don't you stand? And I think it's a healthy thing for grassroots community activism.
Of course, your regular beat is as the local government editor of Conservative Home, and one of the concerns for many Reform Party campaigners is that actually some of these local elections that we're all expecting on May the 1st may be cancelled because of Angela Rayner's reorganisation of local government. Do we have any further idea of where is actually going to be allowed to vote come next year and where these elections will not go ahead?
Yeah, I think most of the elections will go ahead, but there are some particular places. Thurrock, for example, I think have asked if they can cancel the elections pending reorganisation. That would be a prime Reform UK
and also
target.
A council that went bust recently.
Yes, and Essex is obviously a prime target for them, and that's one of the areas where they threatened to postpone the elections. I think it would be a mistake for Reform UK's opponents to go down that route. I think that would just make people more inclined to sign up and be more motivated. I think the difficulty Reform UK might have actually is that they do so well that they take control of a council, having had no previous councillors with no experience, and then they come up against the bureaucratic machine, and they might find it quite daunting.
Yes, of course, that's what happened to the Green Party in Brighton. They ran that council, and then recycling rates went down.
Yes.
Rubbish was left in the streets, and they were turfed out after, what was it, 4 years?
Yes. So they had a disastrous record there. But no, I think the Conservatives, they should respond to this positively. Lord Hannan had suggested your colleague Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg should be made Conservative Party chairman. I think that sort of having somebody energetic and high profile who's a strong, true believer saying, right, this is what we believe in, come and sign up. And I think Kemi Badenoch does have strong Conservative values, but there needs to be an evangelical effort
now,
with
Harry,
that.
Just finally, I've been looking at the Twitter feed of Zia Yusuf. Now, he's the Reform Party chairman. He seems to be asking his followers on Twitter, on X, whether Nigel Farage should sue Kemi Badenoch. He's given two options for the 8,000 people who voted in his poll, saying, yes, hold her to account, or no, she's irrelevant. It looks like the Reform Party is really seriously considering suing Kemi Badenoch for saying that their membership counter was fake.
Yes, well, I think this is a good story for Reform UK to keep going, because as long as we're discussing it, then it's raising in people's consciousness whether or not to join. I mean, Kemi Badenoch's a very combative person. If she's under attack, she likes to hit back. I presume there was some nerdy techno person who suspected that there was some foul play with the whole thing, and she's repeated that. I mean, if that turns out to be wrong, then she should fess up and say she's made a mistake. I would be rather surprised if this ends up in the High Court, but you never know.
Yes, I suppose two things can be true. It can both be true that Reform has overtaken the Conservatives in terms of numbers of members, but also that the way their website displayed those numbers didn't one by one track the actual member sign-ups, and that it was sort of estimating over time and broadly was right but wasn't particular about it. I think that could be
a glitch, so a glitch rather than a conspiracy or deliberate falsehood. Yes, I mean, occasionally I clicked on it and the number briefly went down and then zipped up again, and I just assumed that was some kind of glitch. The only thing I thought was a little bit suspicious was when they said the 100,000th member was Dame Andrea Jenkins, who was a former Conservative MP who defected, and I thought that was a little bit of a coincidence that she just happened to be. And then also the treat for the 100,000th member was having a drink with Lee Anderson, and someone else got that drink. So I think there's
many 100,000th members.
Yes, I think some explaining to do on that one. Yes.
Well, goodness me. Well, Harry Phipps, thanks so much for coming into the studio this Christmas week.
Happy Christmas.
And happy Christmas to you. Let's get some more on this, of course, throughout the programme. I'm interested to hear what you think about this story and all of the others that we're covering today on Merry Christmas Britain. gbnews.com/your say is the way to get involved. But there's plenty more to come on today's programme. Thousands of prisoners could be allowed to come and go from so-called open prisons during the daytime in new plans to ease overcrowding. Is this a good idea or putting the public at risk? That's next.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
It seems that the younger generation's interest in literature is waning. Academics argue that educational policies have failed to encourage reading for pleasure, contributing to declining numbers of English literature students and a shift towards young adult books rather than classic novels. According to 2023 figures from the National Literacy Trust, the number of 8 to 18-year-olds who say they enjoy reading has sunk to its lowest level for almost 20 years, with a quarter fewer reading each day over that same time period. To share more with us about this topic, I'm joined now by the journalist Charlotte Lytton. Charlotte, welcome back. Lovely to talk to you again. Tell us your perspective on this issue. What is happening?
Well, speaking to academics, we can't deny, it seems, that there is a big problem here, and it starts right at school. As you read there, young children simply don't enjoy reading for pleasure as they did before. We can't deny that is also a massive part because of smartphones, because kids now are faced with all of these things vying for their attention. They just don't have to sit down and entertain themselves with a long book and nothing else as they did before. As we see from those figures with people going to study humanities at university, the decline is just going all the way because people simply are not interested in reading for pleasure as they were.
Do you get any feeling that education policy or that teachers are taking steps to counter this?
Well, there is a review of the curriculum going ahead right now, but school is a huge part of it. One of the things that has come up in this conversation is whether teachers now are dealing with crowd control, which means they can't simply encourage reading for pleasure because they're simply trying to get a hold of the students they have.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Merry Christmas, Britain. It's 1:20. Now, more on this growing spat between Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage. Suggestions from within the Reform Party that the latter could sue the former. Yes, Mr Farage could take legal action against Kemi Badenoch over her claims the Reform membership counter was fake. Well, we're joined now by the former Labour spokesperson, James Mathewson. James, what on earth is going on here? There are some real issues out there in the country. We've had no economic growth for the last 2 months. 700 illegal migrants crossed the Channel over Christmas and Boxing Day. And the two leading opposition politicians in this country are fighting about an algorithm on a website.
You're absolutely right, Tom. It makes for poor reading, doesn't it? I think it's a real shame to see that, and I don't expect any less from Nigel Farage. Look, this was an attempt, and the whole point, whether they're real or not, the whole point of announcing this when he has is to try and troll the Conservative Party, and he's doing excellently at that. He's trying to bait them, and I think he knew that Kemi Badenoch could be baited in this way as well. And she's shown that she can be. She's risen to the occasion, and she's bitten off his hand at the opportunity to try and counter this. And all that has done is given the story more and more legs. It's made it run further and further, and it's not good for them. It's great for Reform, because anything that gives them airtime, anything that allows them to extend the opportunity of talking about numbers and are they potentially challengers and all the rest of it is good. It's not good for the Conservative Party. Meanwhile, the government tries to govern. I think it would be better if it was held to account by a responsible opposition. But we're seeing this complete split on the right of British politics at the moment, and I think it's concerning for anyone who cares about democracy.
Do party member numbers actually matter, though? Of course, for most of the last 15 or so years, the Tory party's bumbled around with around 100,000 members compared to the vastly larger voluntary party of the Labour Party. And who's been in power for most of the last 15 years? It's the Conservatives.
Yeah, and let me tell you now, when I was in the party under Jeremy Corbyn, when I worked as a communications advisor, our big message at the time that we talked about from 2017 to 2019, that gap between the general elections, was that we were the biggest political party in Europe, which we were. We had over 500,000 members. It's huge. Did we win either of those general elections? No. So I don't know what that tells you about, membership numbers impacting electoral chances. Of course, it's great to have a healthy membership and a big group of people behind you who show that they're so committed to your support that they'll sign up. But my belief is that people on the fringes, on the most extreme side of politics, whether it be left or right, tend to get those vocal supporters so committed to their cause. But the thing that they need to win elections are people in the centre ground. And they're the kind of people who don't join political parties. They're people who vote with, their conscience when it comes to an election. And they're the kind of people that Reform will not be able to win over at an election.
Is that so true now as it was 10 or 15 years ago, though, James? Because given that we've got three parties now that are bumbling around in the sort of mid-20s in many of the polls, and then you've got the Liberal Democrats on, around 10%, and then below then the Greens on 5 or 6. I mean, given how fragmented the electorate is right now, there'll be many seats where you could win a seat in Westminster on barely more than 25% of the vote.
You're right, and it kind of shows up our political system for what it is, doesn't it? And I think the fact that we've arrived at this point, even under first past the post, which makes it incredibly difficult for smaller parties to have representation. The fact that we've arrived at this point anyway, where we've got lots of different smaller parties now, emerging, shows that, and I am not somebody who believed in PR for a long time. It does not benefit the Labour Party at all to do so. But I believe the most democratic way of us dealing with things would be to have a system of PR. And that would allow those parties to get the representation, as much as I would dislike what we would see on the extreme right of this country's politics coming into Parliament.
Goodness me, that would be a real upending. No more majority governments. That's, I suppose some people would... I suppose people who supported the smaller parties would delight in that. But I suppose one of the issues here is that in order for that to happen, the winner of an election would need to institute a system or indeed scrap a system that benefited them. I suppose unlikely to happen.
Yeah, and exactly. And like we in the Labour Party at the moment, the big hope was reform of the Lords. And we're seeing some reform of the Lords, things like the hereditary peerages being scrapped. But real deep kind of root and branch reform of the House of Lords is what we were hoping for. And what have we seen again? Another Labour Party who've gone into power and gone, actually, right now it benefits us to have a House of Lords that's stacked in our favour. Let's create a load of new ones. So, time and time again, when it comes to it, people like to preserve their own power. And it is a very difficult thing to give that away when you're in a position where you want to change people's lives.
Yeah, who was it who said power corrupts? Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Well, I'm not suggesting that our politicians are corrupt, but some people might have that impression given some decisions. James Mathewson, former Labour spokesperson, thank you so much for joining us here, and happy Christmas.
You too. Merry Christmas.
Now, ministers have been urged to move thousands of inmates into low-security open prisons to tackle the overcrowding crisis in our prisons. Suggestions come from the former Conservative Justice Secretary David Gauke. He's now leading a review for the Labour government. He says the UK should follow Spain's approach, where convicted criminals are free to work and study. Let's get the view now of retired Scotland Yard detective Mike Neville. Mike, thanks so much for joining us. Firstly, what on earth is an open prison?
Well, it's Category D prisons are where people can come and go as they please, really, in the daytime. They often are locked up at night. But as far as the day goes, they're free to wander around. And they're used really for non-violent offenders or people at the very end of their time. But my concern with all this is with the Labour and Conservatives, you often get the same result for two different reasons. So the Conservatives are always trying to cut back on costs, and this is a good way to cut back on costs and not put prisoners in jail. And Labour often see the criminals as some kind of victims of society. And all that happens here is that the people who make these decisions, the politicians and the judges and people on quangos and the like, they never have to live with the consequences because they don't live near these people. The people who live with these decisions who live on the council estates where these thieves and vagabonds and misery makers are released and then cause even more trouble because they can do so because they're free and allowed to do that.
Yeah, it is fascinating, given that there seems to be perhaps more emphasis placed on the life chances of those in prison rather than the safety of the rest of society. I suppose one of the big reasons we have prisons is to keep people separate from the rest of society if they are a danger to that society. It seems that it rather runs against the whole ethos of prison if people can just walk in and out during the daytime.
Absolutely. And as I say, it's the people who are in that shop who are constantly having things stolen, the people who cause misery all the time and commit these petty little offences that really bring lots of trouble to everywhere. And just by way of example of how the state fails us and lies to us, is I did a Freedom of Information Act request around tagging, where people are given these electronic tags and we're told, oh, it's like a house arrest, if they go anywhere, they'll be arrested. Less than a quarter of breaches, so less than a quarter of times when somebody did something wrong, was there any form of police action. And when I say police action, that doesn't mean being arrested and being flung in a cell. It could just be as little as somebody going around there and giving them a warning. So we're told all the time by politicians that there are these alternatives to prison, that we can do all these good things. But in the end, it just means criminals just get away with it. They can do as they please. And I used to work with informants, criminals who gave information. And I know there's one thing that criminals fear, and that is being locked up. They don't fear tags, they don't fear community sentences, and they certainly don't fear open prisons.
Mike, that is an extraordinary piece of research that you've conducted there. Only a quarter of tagged criminals, if they breach their tag, if they stay out later than their curfew, or if they're a predator who goes within an exclusion zone, perhaps near a school, only a quarter of them are actually being spoken to by the police.
Absolutely, and that's in London. It's an utter scandal, and we're told all the time that by politicians that they'll make us safer, they'll save us money, this will be better for society. No one can burgle your house. No one can attack your family. No one can make the misery of the listeners and viewers bad if they're locked up behind those bars, and those bars are effective and they don't get out. And when they're rehabilitated during that time, that's a good thing. But we know just for a short time, however long they're in there, they cannot inflict misery on the rest of us.
Of course, what some people say is that short sentences do have very, very high reoffending rates. How do you solve that problem?
Well, the first thing to say there, because you get all these professors on here who are much cleverer than me, obviously, and they'll tell you that, oh, yes, these short sentences, they don't work because they come out and they offend. What they don't tell you, of course, is they've had 40 previous convictions and lots of community sentences before they're ever locked up in the first place. So the whole thing is an utter left-wing lie. And so what we need to do, of course, is if people go in prison, they need to be forced to learn to read and write, for example, so they can get a job. They need to be taught a trade, perhaps. But what we need to do is make sure that society is safe and that, if needed, people are locked up. And as I say, having spoken to lots and lots of offenders, the thing they fear is the click on that door when they're locked away. They don't fear other things, no matter what experts will tell you.
Yeah, it's a really good point you make about these career criminals, these repeat offenders, the ones who have dozens and dozens and dozens of convictions before they go to prison and then are given a 6-month sentence and we're surprised when they commit crime yet again. Perhaps the answer to these short sentences that clearly don't work is longer sentences.
Well, I'll be with that all the time because I know they can't do bad things there. And often, let's say, and then when they're released, let's not let them go back to the place where they're back with the people they offend with. Let's make sure that in prisons they can't have sex with female officers, for example, so that we just read about on the papers today. There's no reason for male prisons to have female officers or vice versa. The job of prisons is to punish offenders, maybe a bit of rehabilitation. It is not to provide equal opportunities to prison officers. Let's get on with the primary focus of the job. But let's always remember, and I really do reiterate this point, that the people who make these decisions, they never suffer the consequences. David Gauke will live nowhere near any of those prolific shoplifters, prolific drunks, misery makers, antisocial behaviour causers. He's well away from all those, as is all his Labour chums. It is the people on the council estate. I used to see myself as their protector when I was a beat officer. They're the ones who work hard but have to live on these council estates and they have to suffer the consequences of horrible people.
Well, Mike Neville, perhaps we should put you in charge of the sentencing review. Thanks so much for joining us. Retired Scotland Yard detective Mike Neville there. Thanks so much. Well, lots more is coming up on today's show. I'm going to be talking to a former pilot about this terrifying Azerbaijan airline crash. Are people travelling over the Christmas period safe or not? That after your news headlines with Mark White.
Good afternoon. At 1:34, the latest headlines from the GB News Centre. And the Prime Minister has paid tribute to his brother Nick, who died on Boxing Day after suffering from cancer. Sir Keir said in a statement, "My brother Nick was a wonderful man. He met all the challenges life threw at him with courage and good humour. We will miss him very much." The Downing Street spokesperson has confirmed that the Prime Minister has now cancelled his planned holiday to be with his family. GB News can confirm that more than 1,000 migrants have now crossed the English Channel since Christmas Day, as hundreds more are currently attempting to reach the UK for a third day running. It comes as the Home Office has now confirmed that 407 crossed on Boxing Day in 10 small boats. That follows 451 who crossed on Christmas Day. This channel's Kent producer has told us that today already 3 small boat loads have been intercepted by Border Force and around 150 migrants brought to Dover Harbour. A further 2 migrant boats are still out in the middle of the Channel attempting to reach UK waters. The latest arrivals take the total number who've arrived this year to more than 36,000. The Metropolitan Police have charged a man with 4 counts of attempted murder. It comes after 4 pedestrians were hit by a car in the West End of London on Christmas Day. Anthony Gilheeney has also been charged with causing serious injury by driving while disqualified and for the possession of a bladed weapon in a public place. One victim is still in hospital in a critical condition. The UK's national rail network is facing severe disruption as major engineering works, including for HS2, are prioritised over the coming days. To add to the misery, Avanti workers are preparing to stage a 5-month-long series of strikes after pay negotiations broke down. Travellers are being advised to check before they travel. Sources have told the Reuters news agency that Russian air defences were responsible for downing an Azerbaijan Airlines plane that crashed in Kazakhstan and killed 38 people. The plane was diverting from an area of southern Russia where Moscow has repeatedly used air defence systems against Ukrainian drones when it crashed. And Azerbaijan Airlines have now said the plane crash was caused by external interference. A topless member of the Ukrainian feminist group Femin has been arrested after trying to snatch the statue of the baby Jesus from the nativity scene in St. Peter's Square in the Vatican. The woman climbed over the barriers protecting the nativity scene but was immediately blocked by the police and taken away. Those are your latest GB News headlines. More for you in half an hour. And it's Tom Harwood again after the break.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's a cloudy and murky end to the week with fog and some patchy drizzle in places, and it is going to be feeling rather cold under those cloudier skies too. Where we see more persistent outbreaks of rain and drizzles, just where we find this trailing frontal system just to the far northwest of the country. High pressure dominating elsewhere, but there's lots of cloud and moisture trapped underneath that high, so quite a cloudy and murky day ahead. Likely to see some quite foggy conditions lingering on through much of the day too, with some drizzle, particularly around hilly areas. And that more persistent rain and drizzle stays to the far northwest of Scotland at times, where it's likely to be quite grey. And as I say, those temperatures really struggling under cloudier skies, but slightly milder across parts of Scotland, highs of 9 to 10 Celsius. Now, as we head into the evening, once again, that cloud and those outbreaks of drizzle likely to linger on in the far northwest of Scotland, largely cloudy elsewhere, perhaps some clearer spells around Aberdeenshire. And once again, across Northern Ireland, parts of Northern England, fairly cloudy, still foggy at times with those outbreaks of drizzle. And it's fairly similar across much of England and Wales too. And that leads us into a largely cloudy night. Once again, fairly similar conditions with some fog, some low cloud, and also some drizzle in places. And once again, those outbreaks of rain still lingering on across parts of northwest Scotland, perhaps just edging in to western parts of Northern Ireland later on into the day. So once again, remaining fairly cloudy, drizzly at times, and in some places, temperatures not really changing compared to what they were during the day. Now, to start off on the weekend, there's not much change. Once again, plenty of cloud across the country. This area of rain slowly sinking its way southwards, turning clearer to the north of this, though plenty of blustery showers following on behind. And once again, those temperatures really struggling under cloudier skies, highs of around 8 Celsius in the south, but we could see 10 Celsius across parts of Scotland.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley, Glasgow. The M8 on the westbound side. Now the exit slip to come off at Braehead. At junction 25A is closed off. There's flooding there. Some queues for the M6, the northbound side, an issue around Stoke at 15, so that's partially blocked. Also the southbound M42, Tamworth junction 10, down towards Coleshill at 9. There was a breakdown there. It's all been cleared now, so all the lanes are back open for business, but we're still seeing queues on the cameras on that south southbound side of the M42. There's a breakdown causing congestion on the northbound M1. It's around junction 10, the turn off the Luton Airport Spur Road with a lane closed there. Northbound M23, the earlier breakdown's gone from Gatwick Airport up to the M25, so all clear but still slow. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Merry Christmas, Britain. It's now 41 minutes past 1. And speculation continues to grow that Russian missile defence systems were responsible for the dramatic Azerbaijan Airlines crash, which plummeted to the ground early hours of Christmas morning. Well, flight J28243 crashed in a ball of fire near the city of Aktau in Kazakhstan after diverting from an area of southern Russia where Moscow has repeatedly used air defence systems against Ukrainian drone strikes. NATO are now seeking a probe into this incident as soon as possible, while the Kremlin, well, they've cautioned against drawing any premature conclusions. They would say that, wouldn't they? Now there are suggestions that the navigation systems of this plane were also tampered with by Russia. So, with thousands of people getting ready to jet off for New Year breaks, should we be concerned about flying eastwards? Delighted to be joined by former airline pilot and author of Confessions of an Airline Pilot, Why Planes Crash. Thanks so much for joining us here today, Terry. Terry Tozer, that is. First of all, is air travel safe?
Well, yes, it is. And I've always said that the most dangerous part of my working day was driving to and from the airport. I think you have to make a distinction, though, between flying in or very close to active war zones. And obviously, you know, that's a big factor in this case. I mean, all the reasons that I've given in my book for aircraft crashing, being shot down is not one of them.
But of course, this is a very, very significant incident. And it's not the first time that a plane flying in or around Russia has, allegedly been shot down. Famously, MH17, carrying many British passengers, many Dutch passengers too, was shot down a decade ago. And now this more mysterious crash, which of course the report has not yet reported about, how likely do you think it could be anything other than Russian air defence systems?
Vanishingly small, I would say, is the chance of it not being that. There are a number of reasons why. I mean, perfectly obvious ones being, you know, the punctures in the aircraft fuselage and tail fin. Some military experts have pointed out to me that the puncture apertures in the plane pretty much match the designed shrapnel from a Panzer anti-aircraft missile, which are kind of cube-like, about the size of an OXO cube. And a lot of the holes in the fuselage match those exactly.
Now, one of the other concerns that have been reported just today is the idea that the navigation systems of this plane could have been tampered with by Russia as well, trying to force it to crash in the sea rather than land at an airport. Just how easy is it for a state to interfere with the navigation systems of an aeroplane?
Well, not very easy at all. I mean, I think what this refers to is probably a bit of confusion on the reporter's part. Certainly, there has been GPS jamming in that area for some while, and this is Russia trying to interfere with Ukrainian drones. And obviously, that may well have, or probably did actually affect the aircraft, but it had nothing to do with the accident, apart from the fact that it limited the type of approach that they might make to an alternate airfield. So I don't really, I mean, it's a problem, it's a nuisance. It shouldn't be happening, but it's not the reason the plane actually crashed. It crashed because its control systems were destroyed.
It does sound dangerous, though, the idea that GPS systems could be jammed, and indeed are jammed, by many planes that even go in the wide vicinity of Russia. I believe there was an aeroplane that Rishi Sunak, when he was Prime Minister, was on, flying back from Poland, that experienced similar GPS jamming.
Yeah, that's true. And, you know, it is a damn nuisance to the crew. But, I mean, you do actually have other alternative methods of navigating the aircraft. You know, it's not an immediate threat in the sense that the aircraft's not going to fall out of the sky because of it. I mean, it might limit some of your options. But this was, I mean, although it was a nuisance for these guys, it wasn't the reason the aircraft crashed.
OK, well, Terry Tozer, former airline pilot and author of Confessions of an Airline Pilot, Why Planes Crash. Thanks so much for talking us through this very concerning travel story. Let's move on to less concerning travel news. Indeed, if you're in search for some winter sun, probably not in and around Russia, here's the forecast for some of those top European Western holiday destinations.
I hope we haven't forgotten anything.
Travel insurance, I tick that box.
Yeah, but remember what you forgot last year.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
If you're hoping to escape the grey skies of the UK and seek some sunshine across Europe, then western parts are your best bet over the next few days. With high pressure in charge here, areas of Iberia, southern France and into Italy are going to see a good amount of brightness at the moment. In the east, though, we've got Storm Elena affecting parts of Greece, Cyprus and Turkey. This is bringing strong winds and heavy rain, and this will be continuing over the next few days to come as well.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Well, this is Merry Christmas Britain here on GB News. Coming up, newly revealed secrets that former Prime Minister Tony Blair tried to influence a statement on IRA disarmament. This is a statement made by Gerry Adams. Why on earth was Blair interfering? We're going to cross to Northern Ireland to get the details on that next.
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
This is a topic very close to my heart. I have become fully convinced that social media, smartphones are one of the primary causes of mental health problems in children and many other serious problems beside. Lots of governments are starting to talk about this, but the Australians are well ahead in their use of legislation. What do you think about this issue?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, I've got 3 young children and I'm really concerned about, I mean, they're too young to be on social media, but I'm really concerned about what lies ahead for them. I'm not sure I support what Australia's doing, not because I don't think it's a good idea to ensure that age verification is right. I'm just not sure that the age 16 is appropriate. But that's progress. If we effectively, as I do, accept the point that we need some sort of control, then we can move to a proper debate about whether that's 16, 14, 13, whatever it may be. And, of course, there are age restrictions on things like Facebook. I think, from memory, it is 13.
Yes, but it's a tick box.
But it's a tick box, so all you can do is you can just knock. If you're 11 years old, you can just predate your date of birth by 2 years, and you can get on. I think what Australia is proposing is interesting because it will stop young people, maybe without their parents' knowledge, short-circuiting the system because they're going to be asking for proper age verification and ID. That's definitely something we should do in the UK because it's enforcing the existing law. Query, is 16 the right age, Miriam?
I completely agree with it. It's something I actually said should have been done before. And I think what is good about it is that for a long time, a lot of governments have been saying that the actual social media companies should take more responsibility, but they're not going to because it hurts their bottom line. The most voracious users are younger users. So they will pledge that, oh, I'll put the tick box in, but the kid is the one who's going to actually tick the box. So doing something like this is saying that, OK, we will put in legislation that damages your bottom line. And I think it will force the hand because they've said it's only 12 months and they will reevaluate it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Merry Christmas, Britain. It's just gone 10 to 2. Now, newly unsealed documents have revealed that former Prime Minister Tony Blair tried to influence a statement on IRA disarmament. This statement made by Gerry Adams. Well, despite the former Sinn Féin leader's confirmation of peace and disarmament, the IRA later accused the government of breaching trust over a leaked letter. What exactly is going on here, and just how much communication and indeed backwards and forwards work was done between Tony Blair's ministry and Sinn Féin? Well, let's discuss it further with Northern Ireland reporter Doogie Beattie. Doogie, what on earth's going on here?
Well, Tom, this is fascinating. I love to see these letters opened from maybe 25 years ago, because I was in the thick of it back then in amongst the media, and we were guessing a lot of things were going on, but we're told by the Northern Ireland office, no, that's not true, that can't be. And really, Blair's government did something that has affected the media to this day, where they set up other bodies like the Northern Ireland Office, like the Ministry of Health, with their own media people out front. And to get to those politicians, to get the answer, those departments decide who's coming to the press conference, who's going to ask questions. And most of the time, the media agree to put the questions up front so as they have time to answer them. So that was Blair's government that changed that. And that really played out in Northern Ireland, because Alistair Campbell ran that regime with an absolute rod of steel. Basically, nobody got to know anything that was going on that they didn't want you to know. So there was things like deals on the runs and so forth, letters of comfort, which we have covered. But this particular letter is fascinating, because in 2002, the building that you see behind me, Stormont, the home of government in Northern Ireland, Sinn Féin was elected to that body. And Sinn Féin is the political wing of the IRA. The IRA were the biggest terrorist organisation in the world at one stage. I mean, they were supplied by Colonel Gaddafi, Syria, etc. They still have links with Hamas. And of course, at that time, they were caught with documents in the building behind a Stormont gate, as it was called, and those documents were of names and addresses of serving police officers, serving prison officers, civil servants, people who the IRA would have targeted. I mean, they had murdered hundreds of British citizens and soldiers. And when that happened, the government behind us collapsed, and the Unionists refused to go back into government with Sinn Féin because they said they were still a terrorist organisation. And now it appears that Tony Blair was prepared to write the speech for Gerry Adams to get him back into government, because they needed the government up and running. And worse than that, John Reid, the Secretary of State at that time, seemed to know 4 months in advance. And the question that needs to be asked was, Keir Starmer was the human rights lawyer responsible for the policing board at that time, and what he knew.
Absolutely extraordinary story there, Doogie. Thanks so much for bringing it to us live from Stormont. Well, that's it for this hour on Good Afternoon Britain. Merry Christmas, Britain, as we're calling it, but plenty more to come. Do stick with us.
Woo! A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's a cloudy and murky end to the week with fog and some patchy drizzle in places, and it is going to be feeling rather cold under those cloudier skies too. Where we see more persistent outbreaks of rain and drizzles, just where we find this trailing frontal system just to the far northwest of the country. High pressure dominating elsewhere, but there's lots of cloud and moisture trapped underneath that high, so quite a cloudy and murky day ahead. Likely to see some quite foggy conditions lingering on through much of the day too, with some some drizzle, particularly around hilly areas. And that more persistent rain and drizzle stays to the far northwest of Scotland at times, where it's likely to be quite grey. And as I say, those temperatures really struggling under cloudier skies, but slightly milder across parts of Scotland, highs of 9 to 10 Celsius. Now, as we head into the evening, once again, that cloud and those outbreaks of drizzle likely to linger on in the far northwest of Scotland, largely cloudy elsewhere, perhaps some clearer spells around Aberdeenshire. And once again, across Northern Ireland, parts of Northern England, fairly cloudy, still foggy at times with those outbreaks of drizzle. And it's fairly similar across much of England and Wales too. And that leads us into a largely cloudy night. Once again, fairly similar conditions with some fog, some low cloud and also some drizzle in places. And once again, those outbreaks of rain still lingering on across parts of northwest Scotland, perhaps just edging in to western parts of Northern Ireland later on into the day. So once again, remaining fairly cloudy, drizzly at times, and in some places, temperatures not really changing compared to what they were during the day. Now, to start off on the weekend, there's not much change. Once again, plenty of cloud across the country. This area of rain slowly sinking its way southwards, turning clearer to the north of this, though plenty of blustery showers following on behind. And once again, those temperatures really struggling under cloudier skies, highs of around 8 Celsius in the south, but we could see 10 Celsius across parts of Scotland.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Imagine getting the call to tell you that you've won £50,000 in tax-free cash, our biggest cash prize of the year.
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Oh my God. This is amazing.
I'm in shock.
I'd say don't hesitate, do it.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This week is Chocolate Week, the ultimate celebration of everything rich, sweet and indulgent.
Yes, and we now have the best person in the studio with us to satisfy all of your chocolate cravings. We're joined now by master chocolatier Ollie the Choc. Ollie,
hello.
Really
Hey,
good
Ollie.
to see you this
Thank
morning.
you for having me.
And you brought some of your chocolate in with you.
I did. I brought some
Very
tasting
special.
samples. You're very welcome to help yourself.
So what have you got here? Tell us.
So this is my signature chocolate. I call it the Holy Grail. It's got sea salt flakes, crushed Oreo, caramel fudge pieces, very Moorish.
I love a caramel and salt combo. Just, you know, I feel like you see it everywhere now. Look.
You won't be disappointed.
Look, I want everyone to see a close-up of this one. Can we get a shot on this one? So this is Oreo, there we are, caramel and salt. Do you want to try some?
You go first.
Help yourselves. And then this bar of chocolate is a little bit of a wild card. That's a mystery flavour. So
OK, I love a mystery.
I'm not going to tell you what that is.
Hold on this one. This one's amazing.
Are you?
Oreo, caramel.
That's my biggest seller.
I'll keep my palate clean for this. So this is a mystery flavour.
You've got to guess what that is.
Is that a nut in there, I see? Right, here we go. Ready?
I'm not saying anything.
Talk us through.
Very crunchy.
For me, I'm all about textures in chocolate.
Me too.
It has got a good crunch to it, hasn't it? It's not the kind of flavour that you would expect.
Oh, I can't get it.
Is it sweet? Is it salty?
Wait, no, it's salty, yeah.
It's
okay.
salty.
Hang on, bit more.
Okay.
Bit more.
I mean, just keep going.
Crisps? Wait,
It is crispy, it's crunchy. Could it
Right.
be crisps?
I think it could be crisps. Yeah, it's crisps.
So what flavour?
Salt and vinegar. Cheese and onion.
Yes,
Salt and
nailed
vinegar.
it. You know.
Oh, you're much better than me.
Love that. Game.
Do you know what? I think I've got a bit of a cold, so my taste buds are
Oh,
off.
you're going to blame that, are you?
That's my excuse. That's delicious.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Merry Christmas, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Friday, the 27th of December. I'm Tom Harwood. And there's a war on the right brewing. Yes, Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage trade Christmas blows, with the Tory leader accusing Reform of a fake party membership counter on its website. Meanwhile, Farage says the Conservative brand is dying under Badenoch's leadership. Whatever happened to the season of goodwill? And a snap election, not here, but in Germany. Yes, after that government collapsed earlier this month, today a fresh election date is set for the 23rd of February. With the Christmas market attack and a shrinking economy, all eyes are on the right-wing AfD party and what gains they could make. And NASA makes history as one of their spacecraft has survived the closest ever approach to the sun. We'll speak to a space expert and planetary scientist about the significance of this remarkable voyage. Well, a very happy Christmas. I hope you're munching your way through cold turkey, that you got all of the presents that you wanted, that your sock drawer has been replenished. That's the thing I look forward to most at Christmas each year now, is just the idea that I'll get fresh socks. I mean, I think that probably says something about where I am in life, but you know what? If you can look forward to new socks at Christmas, I think that's a marvellous thing. But we do want your Christmas news, your Christmas stories. Did you have a great couple of days? And indeed, are you, unlike me, off work for the entire week? Well, send in your views and post your comments by visiting gbnews.com/your say. We also want your thoughts on all the stories we're covering today. The war of words between Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch. Has the Tory leader stuck her foot in it? And what do you make of this snap German election? All of your thoughts are very, very welcome. As I say, gbnews.com/your say is the way to get involved. But we'll be talking through all of those issues after your latest news headlines with Mark White.
Hello there, I'm Mark White at the GB News Centre. The latest headlines. GB News can confirm that more than 1,000 migrants have now crossed the English Channel since Christmas Day, as hundreds more crossed today for the third day running. It comes as the Home Office has now confirmed that 407 crossed on Boxing Day in 10 small boats. That follows 451 who crossed on Christmas Day. The Channel Kent producer has told us that 5 small boats have crossed from France so far on Friday, with at least 200 migrants on board. The latest arrivals take the total number who've crossed to the UK this year to more than 36,000. It also marks a grim milestone, reaching 150,000 small boat migrants since the crisis began in 2018. The Prime Minister has paid tribute to his brother Nick, who died on Boxing Day after suffering from cancer. Sir Keir said in a statement, "My brother Nick was a wonderful man. He met all the challenges life threw at him with courage and good humour. We will miss him very much." A Downing Street spokesperson has confirmed that the Prime Minister has now cancelled his planned holiday to be with his family. The Metropolitan Police have charged a man with 4 counts of attempted murder. It comes after 4 pedestrians were hit by a car in the West End of London on Christmas Day. Anthony Gilheany has also been charged with causing serious injury by driving while disqualified and for the possession of a bladed weapon in a public place. One victim is still in hospital in a critical condition. The UK's national rail network is facing severe disruption as major engineering works, including for HS2, are prioritised over the coming days. Western services out of Paddington and London are particularly badly affected. To add to the misery, Avanti workers are preparing to stage a 5-month-long series of strikes after pay negotiations broke down. Travellers are being advised to check before they travel. Well, travel expert Simon Calder spoke to GB News earlier and said the work was necessary.
the railways to start turning themselves around and stop taking £400 per second in taxpayer subsidy. They've got to attract new people in. And if you're one of these occasional travellers, and every time you look at it, it's Christmas or Easter or whatever, and there aren't any trains to your local station, just looking up here, I can see that Crewe is off limits today, as is Liverpool and Chester. You're going to think, well, I'm not going to bother. I'm going to get in the car, or indeed get one of the excellent long-distance bus services. But they say the work has to be done. It will improve the system, make it more resilient, and hopefully things will get rather better.
Sources have told the Reuters news agency that Russia's air defences were responsible for downing an Azerbaijan Airlines plane that crashed in Kazakhstan and killed 38 people. The plane was diverting from an area of southern Russia where Moscow has repeatedly used air defence systems against Ukrainian drone strikes when it crashed. And within the past hour, Azerbaijan Airlines have said that the plane crash was caused by external interference. Former Pentagon senior advisor on international security, Ann Daly, says Russia must accept responsibility.
If Russia tries to deny this or cover this up, it could lead to a rift in Russian relations with Azerbaijan. If Russia doesn't apologize for what it's done and provide greater clarity in its airspace management, that could also lead to further degradation of relations between Russia and other countries.
Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has hit back at Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch over claims he exaggerated Reform's membership numbers. On Boxing Day, Reform claimed to have surpassed the total number of Conservative Party members based on a digital tracker on its online membership page. But Kemi Badenoch has slammed the announcement as fake and issuing misleading figures. Nigel Farage had this to say when GB News spoke to him earlier.
You know, I don't mind all sorts of comments being made about me, but to be accused by her of being a fraudster, I'm sorry, I am not going to let this rest. We are going to become the challengers of Labour. We are becoming the real opposition. They can say what they like. The Conservative brand is broken. So many broken promises, time and time again. People have had enough. They're looking for something fresh, new and honest.
Well, in response, a Conservative Party spokesperson has told GB News that Reform has delivered a Labour government and that only the Conservatives can stop this. A topless member of the Ukrainian feminist group Femin has been arrested after trying to snatch the statue of the baby Jesus from the nativity scene in St. Peter's Square in the Vatican. The woman climbed over the barriers protecting the nativity scene, but was immediately blocked by the police and taken away. And those are your latest GB News headlines. We'll have more for you later.
Merry Christmas, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 2, but apparently it's not been quite so merry for two people at the top of the political game. Yes, a fresh row has broken out between the Reform UK leader Nigel Farage and the Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch. It all follows Reform's claims that it now has more members than the Conservative Party. However, Miss Badenoch has slammed the announcement as fake and accused Reform UK of issuing misleading figures with a fake ticker clock coded to tick up automatically. As you'd expect, Nigel Farage has since hit back, accusing her of being bitter, upset and angry. So what's really going on? Has the Reform Party overtaken the Tories in membership numbers? And does the number of party members actually matter? After all, Jeremy Corbyn's Labour had 500,000 members, and where did that get him? Well, delighted to be joined now by former Labour Special Advisor and columnist Paul Richards. Paul, let's start with this row. A pretty extraordinary row at Christmas. I mean, gone is the idea of a Christmas truce, if ever there was one in British politics. What do you make of Kemi Badenoch wading in to this discussion?
Well, happy Christmas to you all, first of all. And second of all, there isn't much goodwill about at the top of the two political parties you mentioned there. And what's extraordinary to me as a political strategist is that the leader of the opposition has been allowed to tweet this and to affect a row between her and a very minor party in the shape of Reform, which means that this is now in the headlines. I mean, the sort of golden rule, if you're, a leading politician, you shouldn't pick fights with somebody much, much less important, because all it does is elevate them. And she seems to have fallen into this ridiculous trap. And this story will run and run now, because, I mean, she has accused him, him being Nigel Farage, of something quite serious, which is faking the numbers on this rise in membership. And he's obviously not going to let it lie, because he knows that they'll get more publicity and, funnily enough, more members as a result.
I think Nigel Farage would dispute your characterisation of Reform as a minor party. They got the third highest number of votes in the general election just gone, but I do take the point, only 5 seats in the House of Commons, of course. It is a fascinating...
The only metric that matters, I'm afraid, as Jeremy Corbyn found out, is the number of seats. And all the other metrics, how many members you have, what your share of the vote is, percentages, all these things don't count in a parliamentary system, because it's about how many seats. And Farage has about the same number as Plaid Cymru, so we need to get that in perspective. I mean, you did say this in your intro too, the size of membership, I'm afraid, doesn't correlate to size of votes, because, as you quite rightly say, lots of people joined the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn, most of whom weren't actually Labour supporters necessarily, but they did swell the ranks. And then Labour got absolutely smashed in the election in 2019. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win a massive landslide. But it does. It is a sign, to be fair, that Reform is on the march, and it is a phenomenon, and it has been since the election within our political system, because of the reasons you say, that a large number of people in many seats did vote Reform, even though our first past the post systems mean they didn't get the number of seats that might correlate to. So yeah, there is something going on here. But why Kemi has picked this fight, I absolutely don't understand. I mean, it really is balmy, because it's generated headlines where there was no need to at all.
Yeah, do you think this is perhaps one of the first major missteps from the Conservative Party leader? After all, the Reform Party saying it's got more members than the Conservative Party is an interesting story, but perhaps it's a page 10 story rather than a front page story. However, a war of words between Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch, now that's sexier. That's something that's much more going to lead newspapers and websites and television programmes, this sort of back and forth rather than one man shouting into the void. That's really made it a much larger story than it otherwise would be.
I remember reading a long time ago of sort of what makes news, and one thing that does make news is conflicts, a big row, a spat, people falling out. And if it's the two leaders of the sort of two right-wing political parties having a big row about this, that is going to generate the headlines. It's going to get in the news, and it's going to run and run, because it's very much in Reform's interest to make sure that it does. And maybe it will now become self-fulfilling. They will now get the members that they want to take over the Conservatives. We know that the Conservatives' leadership contest suggested that there was only 130,000 members, but many people are saying that they were sent, even though they were lapsed, they were sent the ballot papers, even though they were lapsed members, and even some people received it who had, weren't even alive anymore. So even that number is probably lower than is being advertised. And it does show that the Conservative Party itself is hollowing out in terms of its membership base. It's certainly older, and there's less activists. But as I said, doesn't matter. It's about votes in ballot boxes and seats in Parliament, not just members on a list somewhere.
Well, we've spoken about the potential misstep there from Kemi Badenoch, elevating this story. What about the potential misstep from Nigel Farage here? I mean, this isn't the first fight that he's picked with Kemi Badenoch. There was they traded video clips of each of them, Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch, saying things about the numbers of foreign students the day that the migration statistics came out. Do you think Nigel Farage is spending too much time attacking the Conservatives when as you say, I mean, the party with the most seats in Parliament, the party of government, is of course the Labour Party?
Well, I think Farage's strategy is fairly clear, which is to supplant the Conservative Party, just like the Labour Party did to the Liberals back in 1906 6 or whenever it was, and that's he's talked about this swapping over of the main opposition party, and then he has his sights on the Labour Party next. But I think he has to destroy the Conservatives first, and he's been very overt in that regard. And he did actually knock out quite a few Conservative MPs, not necessarily winning for reform, but helping Labour over the line in many seats at the last election. So I think that strategy is to, his main attack is on the Conservatives. And Kemi has not had a good few weeks. I mean, she is a new leader, but you would expect that to mean that there'll be lots of excitement and buzz and money following her. But all the money seems to have gone to reform, and all the buzz seems to be about Farage. And she's not doing well, for example, at Prime Minister's Questions. Now, I know not everyone watches Prime Minister's Questions, but it does set a tone. It sort of sets a mood, particularly with the parliamentary party. And she's not very good at that. Starmer is beating her most weeks in PMQ. So on the sort of things that we measure, parliamentary performance, does the money come? Are you getting more members? Is there a buzz around you and excitement? She's failing on all those different tests. It's early days for her. Let's be fair. Let's see how she gets on. But if I was a Conservative member, I'd be a bit disappointed, I think, so far.
OK, Paul Richards, former Labour Special Advisor and columnist. Thanks so much for joining us, and indeed, happy Christmas. Now, the German president has dissolved the country's parliament ahead of a snap election, now set for the date of the 23rd of February. A fresh election was inevitable after Chancellor Olaf Scholz lost a confidence vote in his parliament earlier this month, collapsing the government there. Opinion polls suggest that Mr. Scholz and his Social Democrat Party will lose the election to the Christian Democrats. That's Merkel's old party, now led by Friedrich Merz. But the radical right AfD, Alternative for Deutschland party, interestingly, is polling in a close second place. Well, what on earth will go on in February in Germany? Delighted to speak now to the Conservative Home columnist and German politics expert, Alexander Bowen. Alexander, thanks for joining us on the show. First of all, what is likely going to happen in February? What are the polls telling us now?
So the polls are essentially showing the CDU-CSU, so that's the Christian Democrats in Bavaria, and then the rest of Germany, on about 30 to 35% of the vote. It's varying between that. Then the AfD on a high second at about 19, 20%. There's been a bit of a recent uptick in the last week or so, where it's gone up by about 2 or 3 points. And then the Greens and SPD, which are the two incumbent left-wing parties, they're on about 14 to 16% of the vote again. And then you have 4 more political parties trying to cross the 5% minimum threshold. So these vary from 2 hard left outfits to a liberal outfit to a sort of centrist anti-vax outfit.
OK. But a lot of the focus, of course, on the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland, which you say has risen in the polls in the last week or so. Do you think that has anything to do with the Christmas market attack that we saw? That I think it's very hard to guess what the political repercussions or what the political sort of knock-on effects are from that deadly event.
It's a bit too soon to say because obviously polling has a lag of about 5 to 6 days. So the rise in the last week is really a rise in the last sort of 2-3 weeks. Given the circumstances of the event, there's some speculation about what did this person actually believe? Were they associated with the AfD? And then obviously their status as an asylum seeker. It's this very mixed picture, so I'm not sure it's going to trickle through to the general election necessarily. As it stands right now, it could, but it hasn't yet.
But of course, even if the AfD were to pick up many more percentage points, if they were to jump into first place perhaps on 30% or more, it's unlikely they'd form the government because of the promises of all of the other parties in this proportional representation system. What have the other parties said about working with the AfD?
So every party has ruled it out. Every single party. If you remember maybe back to 2020, one of the things that actually collapsed Merkel's original planned successor was that they accidentally worked with the AfD. They didn't even deliberately do it, and that collapsed that government.
How do you accidentally work with a party?
So what happened is the CDU and the Liberals both voted for the Liberal candidate to be in charge of the state of Thuringia, and the AfD also voted for the Liberal candidate to sort of troll the Liberal Party. Which had this effect of of them working with the AFD by accident, and they nearly had the same consequence the other day, where they nearly voted for Olaf Scholz again to troll Olaf Scholz. The AFD is quite keen on doing this because they find it quite funny because they're working with them whether they like it or not.
So the CDU-CSU, Merkel's party, the sort of centre-right Christian Democrats, are so sort of... They see the AFD as so toxic that if the AFD vote for an outcome, they see that outcome as sort of associated with the AFD. I mean, that seems almost crazy.
Well, it's a very different scenario to what's happening in the European Parliament, for instance, right now. So at the European Parliament, they're working with Le Pen, but they're not working with the AFD. So they've drawn a sort of clear distinction between like their idea of far-right political parties and hard-right political parties. So I think if you look at the AFD specifically in Thuringia, for instance, the German court system has classified them as a fascist political party. So I think for them, there's a very clear cordon sanitaire, red line drawn between the two sort of groups.
Now, of course, the German government collapsed because of this vote in the parliament, in the Bundestag. The collapse in confidence in the way that Olaf Scholz has managed migration, has managed the economy. Germany's been in recession for the best part of the last 2 years. The manufacturing output has collapsed. Energy prices, of course, very high. They've been shutting down their nuclear power stations. I mean, it's really the basket case of Europe in many, many respects. But after the election is set and done, it could well be that the socialists, the SND, the Social Democrats, I should say, are going to be back in government because of this proportional representation coalition system.
Yeah. So right now, there's only two likely coalitions that are possible. The sort of conservative-led coalition with the Greens, also a centre-left incumbent party, or a conservative-led coalition with the SPD. Again, like a social democratic left-wing political party that's currently in government. It's going to be an interesting time in that regard because it's most likely going to be the Social Democrats. But if it is the Social Democrats, it's very much a repeat of what happened under Merkel, which she governed for 3 or 4 terms under Merkel. Under the SPD.
I will be fascinated to see what happens in Germany if the country votes out the Social Democrats, and the Social Democrats then end up back in government. The people that just got a kicking in the election from first to third place end up back in making decisions, running ministries. I mean, an extraordinary system. Alexander Bowen, thanks so much for joining us here on Merry Christmas Britain, as we're calling it this week. Well, this is indeed Merry Christmas Britain on GB News, and there's plenty more coming on today's show, including data which has revealed the significant majority of civil servants are still working from home. Yes, attendances in some departments, get this, are as low as 5%. Extraordinary numbers. More on this after the break.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Osama bin Laden issued a fatwa entitled World Front for Combat Against Jews and Crusaders, and President George W. Bush talked of a crusade on terrorism. In 2010, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula sent a parcel bomb to New York. It was addressed to Reginald of Chatillon. The addressee had died at the hands of Saladin in 1187. Those facts suggest that the long history of struggle between Christendom and Islamic caliphates remains relevant, at least to some militant Islamists. That being the case, perhaps we should all understand the past. General Sir Simon Mayle, a former Deputy Chief of the Defence Staff Operations, can be our teacher, particularly if we want to know in gory detail about battles to control Jerusalem, Constantinople, Vienna and the Eastern Mediterranean. His new book is called The House of War. It's an excellent read, which perhaps ought to figure in a national adult curriculum. And he joins me. Well, let's begin with the word crusade. What was it that drove Christians around Europe to want to cross to the Holy Land and seize Jerusalem?
Context and timing is really important to understand. It's been rather stereotyped as Christian aggression against peace-loving Muslims. The Islamic religion had burst out of the desert in the 7th century with the death of the Prophet Muhammad. And for the next nearly 400 years, had Christianity, Christendom, the Christian states absolutely on the back foot. It took the Holy Land, destroyed the Persian Empire, took the North Africa, which was Christian at the time, including Egypt, of course, took Spain all the way into Tours, Charles Martel. 100 years after the death of the Prophet, it expanded in an extraordinary state.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Happy Christmas, Britain. It's 26 minutes past 2. Now, at the risk of jinxing things, it looks like 2024 has stayed pandemic-free. At least, I hope you're not watching the spread of bird flu in the United States with as much anxiety as some are. Well, why are so many of our civil servants still working from home, given the pandemic has been over for years now? Well, data released by the ONS shows that attendance in some of these offices owned by the civil service is as low as 5%. 5%. Well, of course, this comes at a time of tax rises and generous pay deals for the public sector, which does beg the question, are taxpayers getting a fair deal? Well, we're joined now by the Investigations Campaign Manager at the Taxpayers Alliance, Joanna Marchong. Joanna, thanks so much for joining us. What do these numbers tell us?
Well, working from home has kind of become the norm, and it's become something that's both within the public sector and the private sector. But it's become very clear to us that considering the year we've just had with the data released and the kind of shoddy things that we've had to put up with, tax rises, lack of public services, it just shows that it's clearly not working for the public sector. There's a lack of productivity, and that just shows that, and it's reflected in their work now as well.
So when we're looking at some of these numbers, I find it I can't even imagine what a sort of a 5% attendance rate would look like in some of these offices. I mean, do we just have building after building that is funded by the taxpayer sitting empty?
Pretty much. I mean, when you look at the data that the ONS released, it showed that, in fact, not only was in some of these locations, it was less than 5%, but it was actually in all of them for the month that they recorded that data, less than 20%, or just about 20%. So even the best case scenario where they're saying people are actually coming in is pretty shoddy.
Now, what does this actually mean for productivity? Because I've heard the argument, I'm sure you've heard the argument time and time again, that people feel like they're more productive if they work from home. They don't lose hours commuting in and out of work, that they can get just as much stuff done with a Zoom call or a Teams call with their colleagues than they could face-to-face. Are we seeing that in the data?
Potentially not. I mean, the ONS in itself, public-run body, institution, was heavily criticised by the Bank of England recently, where they were saying they were picking faults with the ONS's labour force statistics data. And that in itself went towards data that the ONS calculated for estimated GDP growth. Now, this is only a recent example, but we've seen that the ONS had to revise their statistics and actually say from July to September, estimated growth is not 0.1%, it's actually 0%. So all of these stats, I think we're just running ourselves into a period of going back to the era of where did you get your stats from? Is it correct? It's now we can't rely on government produced work or even Quango produced work for the stats and the data we're seeing to then for policy advisors or even academics and the like.
Now, famously, across the private sector, we're seeing many of the companies that had very generous work-from-home policies through the pandemic period now saying to their workers, get back into the office. We're losing productivity because of so much working from home. Still an element of flexible working, of course, but at least some days in the office. Do we have any evidence that that's being reflected in the public sector, or is it still a completely parallel world?
Well, I think we saw a push earlier this year to get people back into the office, and that was greatly kind of received. There was a bit of pushback, but now with Labour in charge, they've completely dropped the ball on trying to get these workers back into their offices. And we're seeing now that there were talks about these public servants and people working for these public institutions that they're actually going to strike because they don't want to come in at more than 2 days a week. I think personally that is absurd that they're just putting their foot down and saying, no, we don't want to leave our beds, essentially.
Striking because you have to come into the office 2 days a week. I mean, that's just completely inverted the work week that I thought most people were used to, 5 days on, 2 days off. It seems that some in the civil service want completely the opposite. Well, Joanna Marchand, thanks so much for talking us through this extraordinary new set of figures here. Investigations Campaign Manager at the Taxpayers Alliance, Joanna Marchand, thanks for joining us. Well, this is Merry Christmas Britain, and there's plenty more to come, and you want to stick around for this one. NASA may have made history with one of their spacecraft flying closer to the sun than any object has ever been before, any man-made object, getting within the atmosphere of the sun. What does this mean for us? We're going to speak to a space and planetary scientist after this.
Hello there, I'm Mark White. The latest headlines from the GB News Centre. And GB News can confirm that more than 1,000 migrants have now crossed the English Channel since Christmas Day, as hundreds more crossed today for the third day running. It comes as the Home Office has now confirmed that 407 arrived on Boxing Day in 10 small boats. That follows 451 who made the illegal crossing on Christmas Day. Our Kent producer has told us that 5 small boats have crossed from France so far on Friday, with at least 200 migrants on board. The latest arrivals take the total number who've arrived in the UK this year to more than 36,000. It also marks another grim milestone, reaching 150,000 small boat migrants since the crisis began in 2018. The Prime Minister has paid tribute to his brother Nick, who died on Boxing Day after suffering from cancer. Sir Keir said in a statement, "My brother Nick was a wonderful man. He met all the challenges life threw at him with courage and good humour. We will miss him very much." A Downing Street spokesperson has confirmed the Prime Minister has now cancelled his planned holiday to be with his family. The Metropolitan Police has charged a man with 4 counts of attempted murder. It comes after 4 pedestrians were hit by a car in the West End of London on Christmas Day. Anthony Gilheany has also been charged with causing serious injury while driving while disqualified. The possession of a bladed weapon in a public place is another charge. One victim is still in hospital in a critical condition. The UK's national rail network is facing severe disruption as major engineering works, including for HS2, are prioritised over the coming days. Western services out of Paddington are particularly badly affected. To add to the misery, Avanti workers are preparing to stage a 5-month-long series of strikes after pay negotiations broke down. Travellers are being advised to check before they travel. Sources have told the Reuters news agency that Russian air defences were responsible for downing an Azerbaijan Airlines plane that crashed in Kazakhstan and killed 38 people. The plane crashed as it was diverting from an area in southern Russia where Moscow has repeatedly used air defence systems against Ukrainian drone strikes. And Azerbaijan Airlines have also said the plane crash was caused by external interference. A topless member of the Ukrainian feminist group Femen has been arrested after trying to snatch the statue of the baby Jesus from the nativity scene in St. Peter's Square in the Vatican. The woman climbed over the barriers protecting the nativity scene, but was immediately blocked by the police and taken away. Those are all your latest headlines from the GB News Centre. We'll have more later.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's a cloudy and murky end to the week with fog and some patchy drizzle in places, and it is going to be feeling rather cold under those cloudier skies too. Where we see more persistent outbreaks of rain and drizzles, just where we find this trailing frontal system just to the far northwest of the country. High pressure dominating elsewhere, but there's lots of cloud and moisture trapped underneath that high, so quite a cloudy and murky day ahead. Likely to see some quite foggy conditions lingering on through much of the day too, with some drizzle, particularly around hilly areas. And that more persistent rain and drizzle stays to the far northwest of Scotland at times, where it's likely to be quite grey. And as I say, those temperatures really struggling under cloudier skies, but slightly milder across parts of Scotland, highs of 9 to 10 Celsius. Now, as we head into the evening, once again, that cloud and those outbreaks of drizzle likely to linger on in the far northwest of Scotland, largely cloudy elsewhere, perhaps some clearer spells around Aberdeenshire. And once again, across Northern Ireland, parts of Northern England, fairly cloudy, still foggy at times with those outbreaks of drizzle. And it's fairly similar across much of England and Wales too. And that leads us into a largely cloudy night. Once again, fairly similar conditions with some fog, some low cloud, and also some drizzle in places. And once again, those outbreaks of rain still lingering on across parts of northwest Scotland, perhaps just edging in to western parts of Northern Ireland later on into the day. So once again, remaining fairly cloudy, drizzly at times, and in some places temperatures not really changing compared to what they were during the day. Now, to start off on the weekend, there's not much change. Once again, plenty of cloud across the country. This area of rain slowly sinking its way southwards, turning clearer to the north of this, though plenty of blustery showers following on behind. And once again, those temperatures really struggling under cloudier skies, highs of around 8 Celsius in the south, but we could see 10 Celsius across parts of Scotland.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules. Buckley, some queues around York on the southbound A1M. Heavy past junction 44. It follows an earlier collision southbound. That queues back to Boston Spa at 45. Oxfordshire, the southbound M40 slow from Brackley down to Bicester, junction 10 to 9. Eastbound M4 slow and Windsor toward Langley. So junction 6 to junction 5 eastbound. There was a lane closed for a breakdown. That's now reopened, but still slow going. Northbound M1, there's a breakdown blocking a lane, causing queues. It's around the turn-off junction 10, the Luton Airport Spur Road, adding about half an hour onto journeys. And the westbound M27 in Hampshire at the Fareham Gosport turn-off junction 11 for the A27. A lane closed on the exit slip, it's slow going. There's been a collision.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Merry Christmas, Britain. It is 38 minutes past 2, which means it's time to check in with Martin Daubney. What's coming up on his show? And Martin, you've changed.
Yes, I have. Thank you very much.
It is, of course, Dawn Neeson.
My Christmas present was the complete sex change. No, I am being Dawn Daubney. No, we're not married. We haven't got married over Christmas. Don't happen. No, so I'm standing in for Martin, who's having an extra festive day, well deserved, and we've got a real cracker of a show coming up for you because it's Twixtmas. Ooh. It's Merry Twixtmas now, isn't it?
Because we're between
yeah,
betwixt.
betwixt. There you go, betwixt. So we are being betwixt today. We've got a good show coming up. We've got the travel, New Year travel chaos, you know, more strikes. So it's a New Year, same old, same old. We are also doing what pubs are doing to fight back against Rachel Reeves.
Oh, yes.
Yes. All will be revealed. I'm doing my bit to help.
Excellent.
I think we all should get out there and do our bits to help.
I think I've been to 3 pubs so far over the Christmas period. Yes, just this morning.
Just this morning,
just
before the show.
Got to limber up before national television.
I think so, yeah. You need to sort of like keep the vocal cords moistened, lubricated.
Yeah, very healthy.
Yeah, so we're supporting our pubs. We're seeing what they are doing. We've also got a barrister, get this one, who believes that we are actually being too nice to prisoners and it's time we stopped.
Oh, wow, the only barrister in the country?
The only barrister in the
You found one?
We found one that actually wants to do his job properly. Who'd have thought it? Sorry if you're barristers, by the way. Also, what we are... Oh, look, you know, what did you get for Christmas?
Socks.
OK, that's not very sexy, is it?
I got a washing basket. I got socks. I got... Ooh, you'll like this, Dawn. I got a tour of an abandoned tube station.
Oh, at the Aldwych in London?
Yes.
Yes, I've done that. It's brilliant, isn't it?
One. Yeah.
No, oh, you haven't done it yet?
No.
It's haunted.
Ooh.
Yeah, several ghosts down there.
Well,
it's really, really good. The socks and the laundry basket. So one of the things we're doing, you might find this useful, is what to do with presents you're not over keen on.
No, I am very keen on these presents. I have to...
a laundry basket?
It's the sorts of things that you don't buy yourself. It's the sort of... every Christmas...
Who brought you a laundry basket?
My grandmother. It's a brilliant laundry basket.
No, grandmother, that's lovely. No, if your grandmother buys
it,
that's lovely.
Fantastic because I've just moved house and it's so necessary and useful.
It is, really.
And productive. And also socks. It's the only time of year I replenish my sock drawer.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very important time of it because you never think to buy yourself socks.
No, you don't.
It's the sort of thing you have to rely on your family for.
That's true, yes. Yeah. Have you got patriotic socks like our baubles?
No, I haven't. I tell a lie. I do have a pair of GBNews socks.
Perfect. Excellent. So you're happy with your presents. And finally, the final story is what I've got in common with Gary Lineker.
Oh.
All will be revealed.
I am on the edge of my seat.
You should be.
On tenterhooks.
You really, really should be.
You're up at 3, in for Martin Daubney. See you then. Well, we're going to move on now and we're going to go to outer space. Yes, history was made today as a NASA spacecraft survived its closest ever approach to the Sun. Well, the Parker Solar Probe went up close and personal with the Sun, passing a mere 3.8 million miles away from the star. It sounds far, but it's really, really close when you realise that the Earth is 93 million miles from the Sun, I should say. Well, temperatures there go up to 1,400 Celsius. Very, very high. It's more than 1,800 Fahrenheit. Delighted to be joined now by the space and planetary scientist Andy Lound. Andy, why does this matter? Why did NASA fly this very fast probe this close to the Sun?
Yeah, Merry Christmas. Yes, this is very exciting. The need to do this mission was because it's flying through the outer atmosphere of the Sun called the corona. And we usually only see that during an eclipse of the Sun, where you see the big bright light around the moon, which is covering the Sun. And that's the corona. And there's a lot of mysteries about the corona. One of the big mysteries is the supposed surface of the Sun is about 6,000 degrees centigrade. But the outer corona itself can be millions of degrees centigrade, and we don't quite understand why the outer part of the Sun should be hotter than the inner part. And one of the reasons for that, we think, is because of the movement of the magnetic fields, solar flares and such like, interacting and heating up the outer atmosphere. Now, this also involves the movement of particles which are called the solar wind, which fly through space and collide with the planets, including the Earth. And we need to understand this interaction more because solar wind activity is interesting when it collides with the Earth. We call it solar weather. And when particles hit the Earth, apart from the wonderful sights of the aurora, Aurora Australis and Aurora Borealis that we see, which everybody thinks is wonderful, these particles can actually cause the atmosphere to swell, which means that satellites which are in lower Earth orbit now start to encounter parts of the atmosphere and slow down, which means they have fear of coming down. Plus, they can damage satellite systems, and it can actually damage power systems on the Earth. And one of the big issues we have with that is this world now is an electronics world. And in the 1850s, we had what was called the Carrington event, named after the scientist who observed a huge solar flare And a few days later, the solar particles collided with the Earth, and then we only had radiotelegraphy. But the radiotelegraphic lines burst into flames, set fire to fields, and knocked out the system. If a similar event was to happen today with all our electronic systems, we could actually black out the entire planet. So it's quite important that we understand the nature.
That sounds incredibly important, Andy. I mean, this is extraordinary. I mean, the Carrington event, a well-recorded event, but if there was the amount of tech, for want of a better word, on the Earth in 1850 that there is today. I mean, are we really talking about potentially planes falling out of the sky, explosions in any sort of heavy machinery, sort of communications, means of communication just completely going kaput?
Yes, we could. We could see a major disaster taking place. When there is the risk of a major solar flare when it happens, satellites are put into standby mode in many cases. Computer systems are put into protection mode. So there are processes in place to try and protect power systems, power grids and such on the Earth. But they need to understand it because we haven't had anything as big as the one in the 1850s yet. And if we did, then we could find ourselves in trouble. So we do actually start to put things into place. But one of the reasons the probe goes to is to try and study this and try to understand it in more detail and perhaps get some predictions of when these events might actually happen, because currently we just can't predict them at all.
No, that is incredibly, incredibly important. So not just for the headlines that we've got closer to the sun than ever before, not just because it's very cool to fly a probe this close to the sun, but actually really practically useful things that will protect all of us here on Earth. Andy Lound, thank you so much for explaining all of that for us. Very good to see you and happy Christmas. Well, if you're in search for some solar flares closer to home, for some places where perhaps you'll get more solar radiation in the form of sunshine, here are some of your top European holiday destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries, all sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
If you're hoping to escape the grey skies of the UK and seek some sunshine across Europe, then western parts are your best bets over the next few days. With high pressure in charge here, areas of Iberia, southern France and into Italy are going to see a good amount of brightness at the moment. In the east, though, we've got Storm Elena affecting parts of Greece, Cyprus and Turkey. This is bringing strong winds and heavy rain, and this will be continuing over the next few days to come as well.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Well, coming up, who would you want to help you find the one? Well, these days, mums have taken matters into their own hands to find their son's love. Yes, we'll find out about whether this can be successful after this.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
On the 8th of October at Battersea Arts Centre, a new orchestra launched its inaugural season. The orchestra, which is named Chromatica, is formed of some of the best young musicians in Britain. They're due to perform in traditional venues and in community spaces. The aim is to bring their youth and dynamism to a wide repertoire of music. Predominantly, they'll work with emerging conductors who will have the chance to shape the orchestra and its repertoire. To share her experiences of bringing the ensemble together, I'm joined by the violinist and Chromatica Orchestra lead, Maren Bosma. To what extent is this novel? To what extent is this new ground?
Well, new ground, it is new ground in a sense that this is a completely new orchestra. Obviously, in the current sort of cultural climate, it's not really easy to set up a new orchestra. And so in that sense, it's a novelty for us to kind of try and carve out our space in the current climate of musical orchestras and musicians in Britain.
Yes, I mean, it's quite odd in a way to think of a new orchestra because the ones that we have tend to be struggling and numbers indeed have been reduced. I used to be associated with an orchestra which unfortunately went under. You've got some private backing for this.
Yeah.
Why do you think the private backers have been willing to give you support? What is it that they see as your unique selling proposition?
Well, Chromatica Orchestra essentially is an early career orchestra. So we're formed of all sort of top musicians who've graduated in, say, the last sort of 5 to 10 years. Because everyone is of that generation, there is a sort of enthusiasm and dynamism that we bring to the stage I think is quite unique. The orchestra's mission, it's really focused on creating opportunities for young emerging musicians.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Merry Christmas, Britain. It's 10 to 3, and here's an interesting one for you. A group of mums are fed up with their son's non-existent love life and have taken it upon themselves to find their boys girlfriends. Well, writing in the Mail, the mums have taken the drastic step of advertising their son's singledom, all to try and find a girl who'll be willing to take them on. However, this did get me thinking, would you trust your mum to find that special someone for you? Well, we're joined by the journalist behind this article, Samantha Brick. Samantha, thanks for joining me. This is a very interesting story. How did it all get started?
Hello, afternoon, bonjour from France. Well, about 3 months ago, we had a really splendid day in the Daily Mail, which ran with a young lady who's 19, now 20, and a young guy in his early 20s. And the reason they'd been matched for a blind date was because her aunt had put her forward and his mum had put him forward. And my editors loved the idea. It was a really touching date. It worked really well with our readers. I've been overseeing this column for about 7 years now, matchmaking, playing Cupid, looking for people to find love from late teens till early 90s. And everyone wants to find someone. What we tend to find, or what I find, I'm afraid, is that men are really rubbish about putting themselves forward for a date. So with the whole Gen Z millennial attitude towards dating and not being able to put themselves forward or talk to women on the tube the way, I'm 54, nearly 54, the way we used to in my day, mums are a bit of a loss really as to what to do for their sons. If they're not gaming, they're with their male friends. If they're not doing that, they're not getting out there socialising the way they would back in the mum's day. So that's why we hit upon this idea of mums nominating their sons. And loads of mums got in touch because they want, what mum doesn't want their son to settle down and be happy?
Yeah, I completely understand the problem. And there is clearly a problem, particularly with Generation Z, that they don't approach people in the same way. That coming up to someone in a bar is now seen to be creepy or sort of in this post-Me Too era, people don't want to be accused of being, a creep or a predator or anything like that. So they don't say hello, they don't compliment people, etc. But is the solution for mums to get involved? And would the ideal partner for some mother's darling boy be necessarily who that darling boy would want to date themselves?
Well, I think if you think about it, since time immemorial, going back to Pride and Prejudice and sensibility, mums have always kind of, worked their magic one way or another when it comes to their children meeting the person that they think is right for them. So I think this is great. I think the mums were really great sports. It's clear to us that they really love their sons and they really want them to be happy. And just because they're doing a little bit of meddling, well, I personally approve of it because I know the guys wouldn't put themselves forward otherwise. And who knows, they might meet the love of their life. So from my perspective, I think it's great. And I think if mums were doing it for their daughters, we'd all be applauding it. The fact that they're doing it for their sons is great for me. And then also the big thing is that I hear week in, week out when I do this dating column is that no one's happy with the apps. Everyone moans like mad.
Yeah, it all seems a bit not personal enough. Samantha, I'm afraid we've run to the end of the programme, but thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time here on Merry Christmas Britain. And thanks to you for watching at home. This has been Merry Christmas Britain, but don't go anywhere. It's Dawn Neeson up next.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's a cloudy and murky end to the week with fog and some patchy drizzle in places, and it is going to be feeling rather cold under those cloudier skies too. Where we see more persistent outbreaks of rain and drizzles, just where we find this trailing frontal system just to the far northwest of the country. High pressure dominating elsewhere, but there's lots of cloud and moisture trapped underneath that high, so quite a cloudy and murky day ahead. Likely to see some quite foggy conditions lingering on through much of the day too, with some drizzle, particularly around hilly areas. And that more persistent rain and drizzle stays to the far northwest of Scotland at times, where it's likely to be quite grey. And as I say, those temperatures really struggling under cloudier skies, but slightly milder across parts of Scotland, highs of 9 to 10 Celsius. Now, as we head into the evening, once again, that cloud and those outbreaks of drizzle likely to linger on in the far northwest of Scotland, largely cloudy elsewhere, perhaps some clearer spells around Aberdeenshire. And once again, across Northern Ireland, parts of Northern England, fairly cloudy, still foggy at times with those outbreaks of drizzle. And it's fairly similar across much of England and Wales too. And that leads us into a largely cloudy night. Once again, fairly similar conditions with some fog, some low cloud, and also some drizzle in places. And once again, those outbreaks of rain still lingering on across parts of northwest Scotland, perhaps just edging in to western parts of Northern Ireland later on into the day. So once again, remaining fairly cloudy, drizzly at times, and in some places temperatures not really changing compared to what they were during the day. Now, to start off on the weekend, there's not much change. Once again, plenty of cloud across the country. This area of rain slowly sinking its way southwards, turning clearer to the north of this, though plenty of blustery showers following on behind. And once again, those temperatures really struggling under cloudier skies, highs of around 8 Celsius in the south, but we could see 10 Celsius across parts of Scotland.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Imagine getting a call to tell you that you've won £50,000 in tax-free cash, our biggest cash prize of the year.
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Oh my God. This is amazing.
I'm in shock.
I'd say don't hesitate, do it.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
In 2020, after almost 80 years, Oxford University's Pitt Rivers Museum removed its famous collection of shrunken heads with sewn-up lips and eyes made by the South American Shuar and Ashwar people. How do museums decide what should be shown and what should be confined to storage? Can controversial exhibits be left on display with suitable contextualisation in captions? Who would want to be a curator facing such controversial questions? For review, I'm delighted to be joined by journalist Eitan Smallman. Welcome to GB News. I think many people, when they hear that we're going to discuss museums or art galleries, think that it's going to be, oh, that wokery question. But it strikes me, and I think it strikes you too, that this is not just about wokery at all. There are some really interesting ethical questions here. For example, I mean, let's start with this one, and there are several examples.